Twitter, from celebrities and close friends of Tiger, and when we have those, we will bring them to you. But here's one from Jada Pinkett Smith: prayers up for the GOAT, greatest of all time. And then this one too, pointing out this awesome day of golf. You know, I think this has really hit so many people so hard. We were speaking earlier with Todd Lewis from the Golf Channel, who is on tour right now with the PGA, and said that players were just stunned to hear this in the locker room as they got ready to go out and begin play, that he has inspired so many players to get into this game, and just a level of shock that was resonating through the players, and of course all wishing Tiger the very best in his recovery here. We do know from his manager that he has suffered broken legs, and in multiple places, from what we understand, he is undergoing surgery for that right now at Harbor UCLA Medical Center. Again, this accident happened at 7:12 this morning. It was a single vehicle accident, rollover accident. You can see this is where the car landed, and you can also see the remnants of the windshield there as the jaws of life were used to extricate Tiger from the driver's seat.
Yeah, and anytime those jaws of life needed, obviously the most dire and challenging situation for rescue crews. I mean, they only use those when they absolutely have to. And you can see from the damage to this vehicle that the hood is essentially up, the windshield had been pulled off, the front end is unrecognizable, there's damage to the bumper too, debris is outside of this vehicle, just to the top of the sunroof, moonroof area, and then from a different angle, and different video I saw earlier, it looked like some of the investigators at the scene had identified some debris, that angle, that had launched probably 25 to 50 yards away from the vehicle itself. So the collision, the force of the collision, the force of the impact was tremendous. We had talked about how minimally the speed limit, it was at 45 miles per hour here, Carolyn, on this road, I think we said?
Yeah, 45 miles an hour, and then there's that slope. So neighbors talk about cars frequently picking up speed there. And then you factor in sort of the S curve that we were able to see from wider shots of this area. So as Megan pointed out to us, there is a bit of a turn in the road, and really about that turn is where the car crossed the center divide, crossed the southbound lanes, and ended up here, eventually rolling over and landing on the driver's side.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Carolyn. I just wanted to point out again that there's just been just so much reaction coming in regarding this. You know, the world is watching right now, and there's so many fans of Tiger Woods. We had talked about his impact here in Southern California with his charitable work, and that's why he was in Southern California. Of course, he grew up, born and raised here in Orange County, but his charitable work has continued here, and it's been headquartered here in Southern California. That's something that we want to point out. And we just did a story last week about Tiger Woods, his TGR Foundation, and how it reached two massive milestones in 2021. It is now 25 years old, a big deal, right? And it's also impacted 2 million lives. These are mostly children who come from minority backgrounds, poverty-stricken backgrounds, first-generation college students, and they get the help that they need with the foundation that helps them go to college for the very first time. And it helps them with classes, everything from classes, STEM classes in particular, to filling out financial aid applications, because a lot of these kids they don't have relatives who have the experience to help them with this, and that's exactly what this foundation does. So that's the reason why he was here in Southern California, is the host of the Genesis Invitational at Riviera Country Club in Pacific Palisades. And not only is the host, but that tournament is connected with his foundation, and that foundation does so much great work. So you're taking a look at some footage right now of Tiger's interview with Jim Nantz over the weekend, in which he acknowledged that his back is not great, and that he still needed another MRI to be cleared to really ramp up the training and get ready for the Masters in April, Carolyn.
Yeah, but he was saying that he was, you know, he was excited, looking forward to, hoping that he could participate in the Masters in 7 weeks' time. And Adrian, you mentioned he was in town for this tournament, and this is often a time when he has sat down with you one-on-one to speak about that foundation. And this was a great passion of his, founded 25 years ago, as you've mentioned. I mean, what a milestone to be celebrating. And this was something that meant so much and continues to mean so much to Tiger, to really help these children. Tell me a little bit more about, those interviews and the time you spent with him talking about this foundation.
I can still recall the first interview with Tiger Woods. It's kind of, he walks in the room and just everyone's staring at him. It's kind of a surreal, unusual experience to be around someone with this kind of fame and notoriety, because the guy just enters a room and all eyes, I think there were probably 30 people in the room at the time, just turn and kind of gawk and just stare at his every move and action and what have you. And as we got ready for the interview, I remember we were shaking hands and introducing ourselves, and he's a very kind of serious demeanor. He's known not to give up a whole lot of information regarding his golf game. He doesn't want to give up too much information to his competitors. Very secretive about his personal life as well. But once we got talking about the foundation, man, he just, again, I had mentioned it earlier, his eyes just lit up. He was so excited to talk about the impact that this has on kids. As we've talked about, he says that he's a science nerd, and that's what these kids are learning. There's a big emphasis at the foundation on STEM classes, and they're literally studying rocket science and making creating video games and developing mobile apps. It's so impressive what these kids are able to do, and many of them go on to graduate college. And if you just think about the legacy of 2 million lives impacted, so many here in Southern California, but 25 years. So a lot of the kids that went there initially, that became connected with this foundation, went to the Learning Lab in Anaheim, they're adults now, and they're becoming teachers, and they're just having a tremendous impact on their communities, Carolyn.
Yeah, it is amazing what the foundation has done and how those young people are giving back as well. So what he started has just spread globally. Tiger had wanted to have an additional back surgery, and sort of, we're talking about the science behind all this. He felt he had lost some speed with his swing, and that's what he was kind of trying to correct with the most recent surgery, always trying to stay on top of the game. We want to check in now with NBC4's Gordon Tokumatsu. He is live at Harbor UCLA Medical Center for us with more from there. Gordon.
Well, Carolyn, it's been just past 6 hours now since this accident actually happened, and Tiger Woods was transported from the scene of that accident in serious condition, according to the LA County Fire Department. We are not hearing that much information about his condition at this point. The most we've gotten so far, pending any other arrangements by his doctors here at the hospital for a news conference perhaps later on this afternoon or this evening, is that it's coming from his friend and agent, Mark Steinberg. He is quoted in Golf Digest magazine online, basically saying that he suffered multiple leg injuries and was undergoing surgery. Now, that story moved a couple of hours ago, so at this point it's not clear if that's still the situation, but I can tell you there's a great deal of interest here, obviously, because of the impact that Tiger Woods has had on the sporting world, not just the golf world. In fact, I'll have Jorge over here pan over to show you the media that have assembled here. This is West Carson Street, just outside the entrance to Harbor UCLA Medical Center. You can see media gathering here along the sidewalk, preparing for their live shots. Lots and lots of attention. As Adrian pointed out earlier, this is a global figure, not just in the world of sports, but obviously entertainment. Many people from around the world want to know what happened to him, what his latest condition is. And again, we are waiting for some word, perhaps from the hospital. They might be updating us on that coming up hopefully in the next couple of hours. That's the latest from here, Harbor UCLA Med Center. I'm Gordon Tokumatsu. Back to you.
In fact, Gordon, we are hearing that there will be a news conference held at 3 o'clock today. So we don't know if that's going to be coming from the hospital, from investigators, from his agent. We just know that a news conference is planned for 3 o'clock. And of course, our plan is to bring that news conference to you when it happens. So as you can see, there are a number of crews joining Gordon there in front of Harbor UCLA Medical Center. This is a huge story, as Gordon mentioned, and we can continue to expect to see the crowd grow there as we await for word on Tiger's condition. So we know of the broken legs that his agent has specifically addressed, and we know that he's recovering from his 5th back surgery. So of course, a lot of folks are very concerned about what the impact of that kind of crash might have meant for his back. Adrian, that's been such a concern, of course, ever since we saw the initial pictures of the wreckage.
Right, and Carolyn, we're just got an update that the jaws of life, we've been using that term. Those are special hydraulic tools to help emergency responders cut people out of wreckage, that might not be the most accurate term to be used right now, that they might have just popped out the window of the car and they were able to get Tiger out of there. But that's certainly a question that we will pose to investigators at that news conference that we're going to bring to folks live at 3 o'clock this afternoon. But that is new information that we just got in just about a minute ago. But of course, you had mentioned still the injuries remain the same. Injuries to both legs, injuries significant enough that he's undergoing surgery, and keep in mind that he had not recovered from his most recent back surgery in December, so his body is going through a lot right now, and I know a lot of people are wondering when he might play golf again, and they're just going to have to be patient because these are significant severe injuries that he's coping with right now, and we'll get an update a little bit later on to see how bad these injuries are and what his condition is right now.
And to clarify, at 3 o'clock, we're going to be hearing from LA County Sheriff Alex Villanueva. He has announced the news conference that will be taking place in front of the Sheriff's Lomita station about this morning's accident involving Tiger. And Adrian, you bring up a good point about perhaps the jaws of life not being used, because typically when we see those employed, we also would expect to see the top of the car removed.
Right.
Exactly. And so perhaps that's all it, I mean, not all it was, but they did have to remove the windshield to get Tiger out here because the car is resting on the driver's side. So, you know, you don't want to add too much of like an emotive connotation to this, right? But the fact that if they did not have to use the jaws of life, maybe that symbolizes or signifies that perhaps the injuries are not as severe as you might think as you take a look at that damage. Obviously, they're severe enough. But the fact that you can pop open the window and essentially pull someone out, that means that there was kind of, I guess, less of an issue in terms of needing to have that special equipment to cut through steel and metal and then extricating someone from that. So hopefully that is a sign that, you know, this injuries are not as severe as the damage to the vehicle might indicate. Yeah, and we're looking at some video from the crash scene, and you can see there is quite a debris field here. We had noticed a license plate had been marked off by crash scene investigators, as well as a sign that was struck apparently in that center median as the car traveling on the northbound lanes in a 45-mile-per-hour zone, but headed downhill, so quite possibly speeds higher than that, crossed into the southbound lanes and then careened onto the side of the road here. And when our Megan Reyes was overhead for us, she was kind of able to walk us through what the car sort of hit. It did not obviously collide with a power pole or some larger trees in the area, but eventually came to a rest here. And you can see there is a bit of a debris field surrounding this car. And this is the Genesis 80. It's a courtesy car from the tournament that Tiger hosted this weekend at Riviera Country Club. This was a car that he was driving. There were some photos of him on Instagram right in front of the vehicle, sort of showing it off. And it's a brand new car that's fully equipped with 10 airbags, we've learned from the Genesis website, as well as cameras on board.
And hopefully some of those safety features helped with the impact of this collision. You know, kind of a blessing if you're in a state-of-the-art vehicle as opposed to a vehicle that's older, because they're outfitted with such better features nowadays than compared to just a few years ago. But we had taken a look at the vehicle. We had taken a look at the crash scene as well. Some of the debris, it looks like, was launched out of that vehicle, some good 25 yards at least. And we were able to talk with a woman who lives near this crash scene, and she told us what she experienced. Let's run that for you right now.
But as I understand it, Tiger was traveling northbound toward the city, down from coming back from Terranea on Hawthorne Boulevard before PV Drive North, missed the turn, and as I understand it, may have crossed the center divider through the southbound lane and crashed into the other side. This road can be dangerous. People typically drive faster than the speed limit. But once you get beyond 55, 60, which is easy to do as you're going downhill, it gets a bit treacherous. Where the accident occurred on the right side of the northbound lane, there's an emergency turnoff area where if a vehicle loses its brakes, there's soft dirt, and you can go into that as an emergency stop. And just before that, there's a drop-off down into some horse barns. On the other side of the road, there's a drop-off as well. So either side that you're going to go, if you if you come off the road and you're lucky if you don't hit a tree, but there's no good way to get out of that situation.
So you again, a resident of this area.
Yeah, and that's the second neighbor we've heard describe the very treacherous conditions of this road, which does involve, it appears to be a series of S curves. We have News Chopper 4 Alpha, I believe, back now live over the scene for us, and I just want to confirm that. Megan, are you back with us?
Yeah, Carolyn, we're back with you. News Chopper 4 Alpha. We had to go get some fuel here, but we are showing you the situation right now. What we see different is that we do have a heavy wrecker on scene, and this tow truck here will be able to retrieve that vehicle. Perhaps before they do some type of inventory search, they may want to take the vehicle back to a secure location. But just to recap, there is the vehicle right there, laying right off of Hawthorne Boulevard. And as we were making our way from Hawthorne Airport to this scene, really it gave me a perspective here of how steep this hill is. If I'm shooting it from the north, looking in a southerly direction, you can really get a good perspective of Hawthorne Boulevard. I got the map overlay system up. So there's Hawthorne Boulevard, and this is a pretty steep grade. So it is coming down from the Palos Verdes area toward the city of Hawthorne, and unfortunately the wreck here happened just right here at this point, and this is what we suspect right here. This is first evidence of the vehicle crossing over from the northbound lanes into the southbound lanes. Right there was a sign about 50 yards away. You can start seeing debris, but the sign is laying on the road about 50 yards away. There's a flatbed tow truck. Most likely they're putting debris on that tow truck, and they may even put the vehicle there. But we have a heavy wrecker here, as they call them. They're going to use this big tow truck here in order to retrieve that vehicle, take it back onto the road, and then put it on a flatbed tow truck. And they may do a majority or most of their investigation of that vehicle inside a secure location.
And Megan, you've covered a lot of crashes. Usually when you have these tow trucks arrive at the scene, that tends to signify that investigators are nearing the end of their work at the crash scene, correct?
Yeah, that is correct. They've done all the investigation, accident reconstruction, as we can assume that they got on scene. They were able to reconstruct, gather all the evidence, do all the measurements. They want to reconstruct this accident. Basically, they're going to try to find out what caused this accident. They're going to get the details from the vehicle if it had one of those computer systems, considering this looks to be a very expensive vehicle. I'm sure it had all the necessary modifications and all the technology that the investigators will need in order to try to figure out as to exactly what happened. How fast was this vehicle going? Carolyn brought up a very good point earlier. One thing is we did not see were skid marks. So, were the brakes functioning? All those questions will be addressed as part of the investigation as to what led up to this accident. So as we have this heavy tow truck on scene, this is probably one of the last things now they're going to carefully and cautiously pull this vehicle out, and most likely they'll do a majority of some of the investigation with that vehicle in a safe, secure location, and they'll be towing it off here shortly. But Hawthorne Boulevard right now, Hawthorne Boulevard that is, it is still shut down here until further notice, as this investigation is still ongoing.
And Megan, certainly a challenge to navigate around these power lines, I would imagine. I mean, he's got to kind of pull it in, and you're showing us right now what's going on here.
Yeah, they're going to drag that vehicle out. I would think any evidence or any, that's why earlier we saw some investigators taking pictures, and they do all the necessary markings, be able to reconstruct it if they have to. But once they pull this vehicle out, essentially they're just going to drag it out onto the street. You can already tell when we were here earlier, there was a lot of debris. I know, Adrian, you were talking about the debris that was scattered. Right now you can see some of it is gone. So they've already probably picked it up, put it in a either back in the vehicle or on a tow truck or something of that. But each debris marking or each stuff that they take out, most likely they may detail it, and it's again part of the investigation. But these gentlemen here appear to be from this tow truck company right now, and the next thing what we're going to see now is them hook this vehicle up, and they're just going to drag this car onto the streets, and then I would assume it would be taken onto a flatbed tow truck, and most likely this is the vehicle here. And you can see they're picking up leftover debris, sweeping up the roadway right now. So everything that investigators need, they've already taken it. They've already made the markers here. All the evidence here, for the most part, has been retrieved from investigators, and now it's just taking the last part of this investigation, which is the vehicle, which shows that things are beginning to wrap up here.
And key to this whole investigation is going to be talking to Tiger Woods. He's going to be able to provide the best information to investigators, but when is he going to be able to do that? Because he's undergoing surgery right now, again, for those multiple leg injuries. You had pointed out the challenges, the obstacles of this road, Megan. Not only is it a steep road, but it's also on a curve. And Tiger Woods, while he was born and raised here in Orange County, he's lived in Florida for quite some time. So how familiar was he with these roads? That's something that investigators will be asking. I do want to bring in NBC4's sports anchor Mario Solis, because he has more reaction from some of Tiger's peers and friends on the PGA Tour. Mario, what are you hearing?
Yeah, Adrian, it's one of those stunning incidents that stops us in our tracks. And as you would expect, reaction from the sports community and golf in particular has been overwhelming. Chicago Bulls and former UCLA star Zach LaVine tweeted, "Praying for Tiger. We have already gone through so much in 2020. Also, golfer Justin Thomas expressing his concern in this situation. I believe we have sound. If we have that, let's roll it. No sound. Okay, basically, Justin Thomas saying in an interview that he is sick to his stomach. Also, Justin Rose, fellow golfer, saying Tiger has we've just seen the awful news. We know how tough you are. We've seen it 100 times, hoping and praying you're okay, my friend. Tiger has not played since he joined his son Charlie, 11 years old, at the PNC Challenge a few days before one of the 5 last surgeries he's had on his back. Tiger was doubtful to be able to play the Masters. The next 4 events are in Florida. That would include the Players' Championship. That would be the last opportunity he would have to play. That would be at the Dell Match Play 2 weeks before Augusta National. We also know that Tiger Woods was in town for his annual tournament. That's the Genesis Invitational at Riviera Country Club. We were there last week, spoke to tournament officials who talked about the impact Tiger has had not only on the game, but also his charity efforts. It was a banner year for Tiger's foundation here in Southern California.
Yeah, it certainly was. You know, we're seeing on Twitter Magic Johnson saying, "Everyone send your prayers out to Tiger Woods. He was just in a bad car accident. Let us all pray for his speedy recovery." And Cher tweeting something similar, saying prayers for Tiger Woods. Of course, you know, social media is lighting up with thoughts and prayers going out to Tiger and his family. So many people concerned about his children. When you look at Tiger's own Twitter feed, he lists himself as a father first. And I think, you know, his children approaching their teen years, they have such a close relationship, and we've been able to see a bit more of that as Tiger has shared a bit more of he and his son playing golf together.
Yeah, and I think that's what really resonates with so many people, with his comeback victory, you know, a couple of years ago, seeing him come up the 18th green at Augusta National after winning the Masters. Such an improbable comeback story after all the surgeries and that he had been through, and the physical ailments that he had been through, the challenges that he had been through, to be able to walk off that green and then hug your son. I think so many people can relate to that and empathize with that, to just want to celebrate with your children when you achieve success. And then not only that, but seeing his son grow up and become an outstanding golfer himself, and them having this father-son their father and son relationship put on display in front of the whole world in December when they played in that golf tournament. Again, that's, I think, what everyone is empathizing with and connecting with right now, that they're able to see the joy in Tiger. You know, oftentimes he's so stoic, but they could see the joy in Tiger when he was able to see his son's successes on the golf course, and they were just having a good time as a father and son. But obviously Tiger, protective of his children over these years, and now starting to share his children with the world and allowing them to be in the spotlight. Carolyn.
Yeah, we saw his children, you know, when he won the Masters 3 years ago. That was such an emotional experience for Tiger, for his family, and that was just such an incredible comeback. I think he just really, we all marveled at what he has been able to accomplish in this already remarkable career, and how he has, you know, managed to overcome his series of injuries, series of back surgeries, and you know, now we do know that he suffered these leg injuries that he is being treated for now. We do have Gordon Tokumatsu, who is on the scene for us at Harbor UCLA Medical Center. And are we able to go to Gordon now? We'll be checking in with Gordon shortly, but he has some new information for us, I understand. Now, Megan, perhaps you can fill us in on what's going on here with this effort to extricate the vehicle.
Yeah, Carolyn, this is the final process here where they're going to retrieve that vehicle. These gentlemen here, no doubt, are from this tow company, and their job is to retrieve the vehicle. They're going to have to just kind of wrap things around the tires, and really what we're going to see, they're just going to drag the car out. The evidence that they needed to get from this vehicle, most likely they've already done that. They don't want to compromise it anymore, but they've got to get the vehicle onto a flatbed tow truck, and that's the process that we're seeing right now. So these investigators there in that heavy wrecker, they're just tying up that vehicle, and just we're going to see a very routine. This is a routine process. What makes this just situation a little more different is that vehicle in this accident involved very famous, well-known person, Tiger Woods. So that's why we're seeing all this activity here. But momentarily, you're going to just see this vehicle being dragged back onto Hawthorne Boulevard.
And Megan and Carolyn, I know that we're efforting trying to get Gordon Tokumatsu on the air, but he was able to provide a bit of an update. He says that Tiger was alert and talking with first responders after this crash, so that is a good thing. Anytime anyone involved in the crash was able to communicate with first responders, that is definitely most a good thing. But we do have some sound we want to run right now from dispatchers. Let's take a listen to that.
Hey, let me hear you. It's going to be on the southbound traffic lane between TV Drive North, Silver Spur. Can I get a unit to go ahead and start blocking off southbound traffic from TV Drive North? Acer 173, Adam will take that. Acer, those cars, the last ones, you have all southbound traffic blocked off from Hawthorne and North. Copy, thank you. Hey, 170 David, we are going to need a tow, please. Hey, ma'am, do we have an ETA for fire? We have a rollover with someone trapped.
Just got off the phone with them. Let me call them back.
Hey, I'm going to need a unit to accompany the ambulance transport to HGH, please.
So we are hearing, you know, these first details from dispatch. We're going to need a tow, a rollover with someone trapped. We need a unit to accompany the ambulance. Gordon Tokumatsu is on the scene for us at Harbor UCLA Medical Center now with more. Gordon.
Well, Carolyn, that audio is really interesting if you think about it. These first responders have no idea who they're dealing with at that point as they arrive on the scene, and they're starting to make visual contact with what they're dealing with. At some point, they probably had some identification, perhaps recognizing Tiger Woods, or perhaps he told them who he was. We are getting this right from LA County Fire. I just got off the phone with them a short time ago, as Adrian mentioned. They said that he was transported from the scene in serious but non-life-threatening injuries. Now, that's very important because it's that is very important because it's the first really glimmer of hope here we have that Mr. Woods is doing better perhaps than the visual of that horrible accident would indicate. Also, he was conscious and responsive to those first responders, among them paramedics who arrived first on the scene there. That is also really good news, because if he is conscious, that means he is making a connection with those who are trying to pull him out of that vehicle. That helps them a lot with assessing what his injuries are. He can tell them where it hurts, what he believes is broken, that sort of thing. So that's definitely good news. At this point, this is pretty much all we have. We know that he was transported from the scene via ambulance here to Harbor Medical Center, UCLA Harbor, I should say. In that ambulance, he was in serious condition. He went into surgery. His good friend, Mark Steinberg, his good friend and agent, said to Gulf Digest that he had multiple injuries to his legs and that he did undergo surgery. Now, that was some hours ago, and of course it's been more than 6 hours since this accident happened. So at this point, we're trying to figure out what his condition is now as he comes out of surgery, if in fact they are finished operating on him. As you can imagine, it's a very intricate process, doing everything they can with the great doctors here at Harbor UCLA. That's the very latest from here. Until we get more information from the doctors, we will, of course, bring that to you as soon as it comes.
Well, this is very encouraging news to hear, Gordon and Adrian. You know, serious but non-life-threatening injuries, the fact that he was conscious and able to speak with first responders when they arrived on the scene, that's critical as they work to extricate him from the vehicle.
Right.
Adrian.
Yeah, just huge developments here. I mean, obviously that is critical. That is crucial that a victim is able to communicate with those first responders at that time, just after the collision. We do want to get back with Todd Lewis with the Golf Channel. And Todd, as you hear that Tiger was able to communicate with these first responders who were helping rescue him, what are your thoughts?
Well, that's the most important thing, is the fact that these injuries, although serious, were non-life threatening. We'll talk about a comeback later, but more importantly, we wanted to make sure that Tiger was going to be with us, because there was a lot of concern when we saw the visuals and heard about the severity of this accident, that we didn't know how life-threatening this accident was. But now that we are hearing that it is not life-threatening, it's a positive not only for us in the golf media, but also for the players out here where I am in Bradenton, Florida, getting ready for the Workday Championship here on the PGA Tour.
Todd, how are those players reacting? I know when we spoke with you earlier this morning, you were saying that word was just reaching them that Tiger had been involved in this crash. What's the mood now?
Concerned, but optimistic. I would say I've talked to a number of players, including some Southern California players. Colin Morikawa, who is the reigning PGA champion.
Yeah.
If you remember last year, he won at TPC Harding Park. He grew up in Los Angeles. He's told me several times that Tiger was his idol. It was the reason that he got into the game of golf and chased it at the level that he's at right now. He was very concerned, shaken, I would say. But once he did hear that although the injuries are serious, they are non-life threatening, there was a bit of relief. And he did tell me, he said, if there's anybody that can come back from this, it is Tiger Woods. That's how much belief and admiration he has for him.
And Todd, I want to share something with you and our viewers right now. I'm not sure if you already saw it, Todd. It came out just a few minutes ago. But Jack Nicklaus, oftentimes people refer to, they have that debate. Who's the greatest golfer of all time? Is it Tiger Woods or is it Jack Nicklaus? Regardless, Jack Nicklaus tweeting, Barbara and I just heard about Tiger's accident. Like everyone else, we are deeply concerned. We want to offer him our heartfelt support and prayers at this difficult time. Please join us in wishing Tiger a successful surgery and all the best for a full recovery. Todd, can you talk to us a little bit about the relationship between these two?
It's one of great respect, no doubt about it. I mean, you probably know, and those who follow golf know, that Tiger, when he was growing up in Southern California, had a poster of Jack Nicklaus on his wall in his bedroom, because that was his inspiration to beat Jack Nicklaus's major championship record of 18 majors. Doesn't look like he's going to do that, but he does have 15. But it's someone that he's always admired. Tiger's felt that Jack Nicklaus was the gold standard when it comes to great championship golf, and he wanted to be like him, and he wanted to be greater than him, actually. And Jack, after he walked away from the game, he saw that Tiger was playing at a different level, a level that he is only familiar with. And so there's great respect and admiration for both. I had an opportunity just last year to sit down with both of them and talk golf in front of an audience. And Jack was excited to do this because he had never sat down and talked golf in front of an audience with Tiger. And I mean, you guys, you're journalists and you're informers, and to sit down with the two greatest players ever, in my opinion, and to have them go back and forth and talk about stuff like, hey, Tiger, what aspect of Jack's game do you wish that you had, and vice versa. I mean, to do that was just a thrill for me, and it was a thrill for Jack and a thrill for Tiger as well.
Yeah, we're hearing from, sports greats across the sporting world. Magic Johnson tweeting, everyone send your prayers out to Tiger Woods. He was just in a bad car accident. Let us all pray for his speedy recovery. Michael Phelps tweeting, praying for Tiger Woods. Alex Rodriguez praying for my brother Tiger Woods as we anxiously await more news, thinking of him and his entire family. I mean, this touches everyone really on a global level, and I think so many people are so concerned about his children right now as well, Todd.
Yeah, and there's no doubt about it that it's easy for us. It's human nature for us to assume the worst. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I've heard players say to me, will Tiger play again? Will he be able to enjoy life to the fullest, which he has been able to do, it seems like, especially over the last few years after having that spinal fusion surgery. But there's one thing to think about in regards to this. I mentioned this earlier when we talked about Tiger was at a very low point about 45 years ago because of his back issues where he didn't have
Tiger Woods, who was injured in a serious car accident in Palos Verdes, California, just outside Los Angeles. Woods has been hospitalized, reportedly with multiple leg injuries, and is undergoing surgery. It's not yet clear how seriously he's been injured, but we do know the SUV he was driving. He was the sole occupant, went off the road and rolled over shortly after 7 this morning, California time, leaving it seriously damaged and forcing first responders to use the Jaws of Life power tool to extricate him from the wreck. Gotti Schwartz is in Los Angeles and has more reporting on this. Gotti, what do we know?
Hey, good evening, Lester. Yeah, looking at that video from the helicopters above, you get a sense of just how violent this crash was. We know that Tiger Woods was the only person inside this SUV, and the Jaws of Life were used. And when you look at that crash, you can see why. It appears as though the entire engine of the front of that SUV has been almost sheared off. Now, we're getting a little bit of a sense as to what might have happened from some of the debris that's nearby. It appears as though this happened on Hawthorne Boulevard in Palos Verdes, and we're getting a little bit of a better picture from some of that debris field. It appears as though he was traveling northbound, crossed southbound, crashed into some sign that was sitting in the median and ended up quite a ways away, facing the opposite direction up on that embankment, with all of the airbags appear to have been deployed, and again, the entire engine from that car, or from that SUV, is missing. Now, we know he was here in California for a 2-day television shoot after hosting the PGA Tour Genesis Invitational over the weekend. Part of that included giving some well-known celebrities like Dwayne Wade and David Spade golf lessons yesterday. All of that was happening at the Rolling Hills golf course. Again, this crash happened at about 7 o'clock in the morning. It's unclear if he was headed to the Rolling Hills golf course or possibly headed away from the Rolling Hills golf course. But at this point, we know that he's got extensive injuries to both his legs, according to his agent, and is undergoing emergency surgery at Harborview Hospital. So that's the latest we have on his condition. But just taking a look at the damage on that vehicle, again, you can imagine what kind of injuries he must have had with his legs near that cavity where the engine was, and all those airbags deployed, the Jaws of Life being used to pull him out of the vehicle once emergency responders first got there.
Yeah, remarkable. The front end of that vehicle just obliterated. All right, Gotti Schwartz, thank you. Also standing by for us is Mike Tirico of NBC Sports. Mike, there's no bigger name in golf than Tiger Woods. You may or may not know the game, but you certainly know who he is.
We all do, Lester, without question. Tiger's been a part of the sports conversation really for 3 decades. He came out way back as a youth on the old Mike Douglas TV show. His dad always wanted him to be a golfer, and he was out there with Bob Hope hitting golf balls at a very young age. And Tiger's been on the stage. He's been in the multiple surgeries. He had just a couple of months ago had his 5th procedure on his back. His back and neck and knee injuries have really shorted what was on the pace to be the greatest career in the sport. Some may say it still is. He's won 82 times, as much as anyone, tied with Sam Snead for the all-time record. 15 major championships. Jack Nicklaus has won 18. But Lester, it's the crossover. It's the fact that no matter golf fan or not, you know who Tiger Woods is. You recognize him, not just here in the States and around the world. It has everybody buzzing here today.
A towering figure in sports indeed. All right, Mike Tirico, thanks again. 45-year-old Tiger Woods, one of the greatest golfers and certainly one of the best-known sports figures of all time, in surgery right now at this hour with multiple leg injuries following a serious solo car accident this morning in California. We'll have full details coming up on NBC Nightly News. For now, I'm Lester Holt, NBC News, New York. Good day, everyone.
And just to share the tweet that you mentioned just a short time ago, again, in case our viewers might have missed it, this from Jack Nicholas. Barbara and I just heard about Tiger's accident, and like everyone else, we are deeply concerned. We want to offer him our heartfelt support and prayers at this difficult time. Please join us in wishing Tiger a successful surgery and all the best for a full recovery.
And Carolyn, Todd talked about this during that short interview just a short time ago. You know, he couldn't really play with his kids, you know, and that was his main goal, was being able to, going through these back surgeries, he just wanted to be able to play soccer with his daughter and to pick up his son. And he said at its worst, I mean, he couldn't get out of bed. This is somebody who's undergone 5 back surgeries now, including, as we mentioned, spinal fusion surgery, which is as serious and complicated as it sounds. And now we're curious as to, you know, how this collision, how this crash might have impacted, again, not only his legs, which we know now has suffered multiple injuries to both of his legs, but how is his back going to hold up? And will he be able to come back and perform at the elite level that we're used to seeing him perform at?
I think the thing that is causing great relief to so many is to hear that the injuries are not considered life-threatening, and that he was able to communicate with first responders when they arrived on scene. All very good signs. We're awaiting more information from LA County Sheriff Alex Villanueva in an hour. Right now, we have Megan Reyes over the scene for us, and they are making some progress as they move his vehicle off this embankment. Megan, it does look like they've dragged it a bit.
Yeah, Carolyn, they're making progress. They've secured the vehicle and almost to the point where they're going to upright it. But right now, what they're doing is clearing and retrieving any debris in the area. They've got a couple of flatbed tow trucks. So again, this is very routine. The only difference is now is this crash here involves a high-profile person, Tiger Woods. So that's why we're seeing this being done in a very meticulous manner. These individuals from the tow company are being very careful and extra precise to get all the debris here, and they're putting it on a tow truck. They've already cleaned up the street and retrieved all the debris from the street as well. And this is the last part of the investigation. They're going to put that vehicle onto a flatbed tow truck, and essentially, most likely, they're just going to lift it up from the tires and then bring it back onto the streets, and most likely just lay it flat on a tow truck here that's awaiting.
It is now 2 o'clock. We have been following this breaking news of a crash involving Tiger Woods that happened this morning at 7:12. Tiger was traveling northbound on Hawthorne Boulevard when it appears he lost control of this vehicle because he crossed over the center median and the southbound lanes and ended here on this embankment that our Megan Reyes is over for us right now. We know that the windshield was popped open in an effort to extricate Tiger from the vehicle, this vehicle landing here on the driver's side. We understand Tiger was able to communicate with first responders on the scene, who in turn requested ambulance transport for him. He was taken to Harbor UCLA Medical Center. His agent has let us know that Tiger suffered multiple leg injuries. He's undergoing surgery for those injuries to his legs right now. But we also know these injuries are described now as non-life-threatening. We're expecting a news conference with Sheriff Alex Villanueva in an hour, and we will, of course, bring you that when we have it live for you.
Right, and we also understand that there was a person who tried to help Tiger Woods, a witness to this scene, and that person ended up being involved in a minor collision of their own. But that person will certainly play a key and pivotal role in this investigation, as will Tiger Woods, once he's able to talk with investigators, if he's not done so already. I do want to talk with Nurse Alice. We're going to bring Nurse Alice in right now. Good to see you, Nurse Alice. We do want to ask you some questions about what we're hearing so far. The fact that Tiger was able to communicate with his rescuers, how critical and crucial is that in terms of his well-being?
That is extremely important. No 2 car accidents are ever the same, but the fact that, given what happened, jumping the divider, rolling several times, and, with airbags deploying and the visual damages that you can see the carts, the fact that responders were able to arrive and he was awake and speaking to them, conscious, following instructions, is very critical. That's a very good sign, and that they were able to respond to him. And But I have to say that this is a very delicate time. I know the accident happened earlier this morning. We have what's called the golden hour when it comes to trauma. That first hour of what is going on and how the patient is treated plays a very critical role. I'm glad to see that Tiger was transported to a level 1 trauma facility, UCLA Harbor. So they have all of the specialists on hand ready to go. They were there to receive him. And so, but this next 24 hours is going to be very telling with what's going to happen with Tiger, because although we've been told about some leg injuries, given the nature of the rollover and how his car looked, there are some other injuries that can happen subsequent to the initial impact.
And certainly, Nurse Alice, one of the things that we've been talking a lot about is Tiger has had 5 back surgeries. He's just in a very he was rehabbing his most latest 5th surgery and was speaking about just about to have another MRI on that. So, of course, we're concerned about his spine at this point when you look at the devastating crash here.
Absolutely. So, with that many back surgeries, spinal fusions, or things that Tiger has going on, that's definitely put him a little bit behind the 8 ball with, how his body has been able to absorb and impact the shock of this rollover. So his spine probably wasn't as mobile as someone else, especially if he's had any type of fusions or things like that. So something that we definitely want to watch for. And I'm sure that the surgeons, the orthopedic surgeons, the neurosurgeons are watching that very closely. So the back is very important. But, the fact that his airbags deployed, just people can sustain injuries from just the airbags deploying themselves. The amount of pressure that is pushed onto the body, the rollover, we don't really know exactly what the full extent of his injuries will be. We're praying the best for Tiger, but we do know that when rollover accidents like that, that the brain itself can rattle inside of the head. The amount of pressure that deployed into his face, his head, and his chest. So some other things that they'll be looking for and monitoring outside of his leg injuries, which are, he's in surgery, he's getting those taken care of. But we're going to want to keep a close eye on his heart and his lungs because there can be contusions and there's swelling and a lot of things that happen after that initial impact, like I said.
Thank you for that insight, Nurse Alice. It is so important that we keep that in mind, that the next few days are going to be extremely critical to see how Tiger recovers, not just from the leg injuries, but the potential of internal injuries. We do want to bring in Eric Leonard right now, investigative reporter Eric Leonard, who has more on the investigation. Eric, what do you have?
Well, one thing that's interesting about this, sort of an unfortunate benefit of the severity of the injuries, is that with the transport to the hospital, there is going to be blood work done. And so there's going to be no question on the part of the investigators about what factors the condition Tiger Woods was in might have played in this wreck. They're going to know. Outside of that, we've watched for the last few hours as they've done an intensive amount of documentation of this scene, taking a lot of measurements, some photographs, figuring out the relationship between whatever marks were left on the pavement, the broken sign, the license plate that we saw, and compare that with where the vehicle ended up. All of that can be put back together later and will give the investigators a really good understanding of how fast the car was going and at what point it began to turn to where it ended up. Also, obviously, they're going to be looking for video, not just video from inside the car, if there happens to be any. Sometimes cars have dashboard cameras, but also cars that were in the area passing by. I mean, for all we know, somebody driving a work truck that might have multiple cameras on it caught a glimpse of some piece of this happening, either right beforehand or as it was happening. Those can be really critical clues, as well as other drivers coming and going along the same stretch of road. They may have inadvertently captured a little piece of information that that detectives will want to look at, plus all of this, the home surveillance cameras, or I should say really call them security cameras.
Missiles on this vehicle that investigators will be able to glean information from directly from the car itself.
That's right. I mean, the more sophisticated the car, the more possibilities there are for different types of recording. There are a few cars on the market that have what are sometimes described as 360-degree cameras. And that's so if you're trying to parallel park or fit in between some other spaces, you can flick them on, and the cameras, using a computer, piece together what would be investigators that it is rare to come across even a modern vehicle that has that level of sophistication. But the data recorder is really important, and those are much, much more common these days.
And this is such a complex crash scene, Eric, as we take a live look at this crane trying to, well, it's now uprighted Tiger's vehicle, but you can see the damage sustained to the front end, to the driver's side window, to the windshield that had to be popped, to the back end, the back tire area right there. Eric, we have a news conference coming up at 3 o'clock in which we're going to be able to speak with the Sheriff's Department. What are some of the questions that you would like answered?
Well, I think one of the interesting areas to explore, and I imagine the officials from both the Sheriff's Department and LA County Fire are going to be forthright about this. I mean, there's not some deep layer of information we're trying to get at. But first is always the timeline. How much time elapsed between the crash itself and when people got on scene there to help out? If it's Tiger Woods driving and he's the one that was most severely injured in the wreck, it's possible he might not have been able to make that initial call for help. And if that's the case, I wonder if they've been able to piece together exactly when this wreck happened versus when they got that 911 call. We're assuming it all happened in very short order, but it's possible there could have been a longer period of time here. Also, once the emergency people got on scene there, how long did it take to get him out? You heard the nurse talking about that golden hour where it's just absolutely critical to get somebody to that initial level of treatment, especially in trauma within that first hour. And not that anyone has any idea that anyone did anything wrong here, but it would be interesting to know how much time elapsed between the wreck itself, the first calls for help, when people got on scene, and how efficiently they were able to get him to a trauma center. We were looking back through the LA County Fire Department's records of this morning, and our best sense, and timestamps can be off, so this is just preliminary, is that after the Sheriff's Department got on scene, there was a bit of a lapse of time before firefighters got on scene, and once they got there, there was about 10 minutes where they were working to get him out of the car. It sounds like it was a fairly straightforward process to get him out. The log of the call, which doesn't capture all the detail, just some general ideas of what happened, doesn't mention any kind of a prolonged rescue effort. So whatever they did was pretty straightforward, pretty quick. That's all good news. That means he gets to the emergency room faster, which is, of course, their goal. But in answer to your question, my question is how much do they know about the timeline here? And is it possible that Tiger Woods was stuck in this wreck for some period of time before anyone was able to call for help? That's really what I'd be curious about.
And I would imagine, Eric, that someone was able to call for help pretty soon after, since the cars, we are told, were stopped at the side. Someone had stopped apparently trying to help when that car was rear-ended. That ended up being a minor accident, but indeed, likely the phone calls began to first responders for help. We want to go to John Kadis-Klimak. He is on scene on the ground for us right now as we continue to watch News Chopper 4 Alpha's view of this as the car is extricated from where it landed. But we want to check in with John now, who is near the scene of the crash for us. John.
Yeah, we're just a little bit south of it. I want to kind of lay the groundscape for you so you understand where we are. I'm covering my ear because I can actually hear News Chopper 4 overhead. We're at the intersection of Black Horse and Hawthorne Boulevard. If you look in the direction of where we're pointing now, this is southbound, so it's actually going uphill to go southbound on Hawthorne. The belief is that Tiger was traveling northbound, so headed downhill, and as we were speaking with some neighbors in the area, they say that they're not surprised as to the end result of what happened here because of just how steep it is. And once you head down this way and you go around that curve, that's really the last curve there, they say if you don't know the area well enough, it can be very dangerous because, as we saw what happened with Mr. Tiger Woods, they're concerned that could happen to a lot of different people if they're not from the area. They do say that they regularly see cars that have kind of gone off to the edge at least every couple of weeks because of that situation. But speaking with these neighbors here today, they've been concerned about what's happened down here and obviously concerned about Mr. Tiger Woods as well. Some of the folks who have come out, we've noticed a lot of people coming to try to take pictures. Of course, it's closed off. You can't really get close to the scene itself. But some of the people come out say that they're not golf fans per se, but they love their area here in this neighborhood and they wanted to come out and see. We did speak with one man who told us that he's a big Tiger Woods fan and that his heart is broken over what's happened and sending his prayers to Mr. Woods in the hospital. Guys, I want to send it back to you. We're going to be staying out here to wait, as I understand that there's a tow truck that's on its way out here that's going to be pulling the vehicle out from that area any minute now. And, of course, we're still waiting on word from the Sheriff's Department for their press conference coming up at 3 o'clock, guys.
Okay, thank you, John, for that. Williams is joining us now. Adrian Arambulo. I'm Carolyn Johnson, been with you all morning with Adrian, but Adrian, who did the morning news for us, is headed home, and Colleen joins us now. We also have Gil Levis in News Chopper 4 Bravo overhead as we make that transition as well. Gil, are you with us?
You know, Carolyn, as we continue to look at the car being moved out of the area, I'm not sure. Can you hear Gil at all?
Not yet, Colleen, but I think perhaps we're just getting all that into place.
If we still have John on the ground there, the one thing that's confusing, if you're watching this coverage from home, and my husband and I were watching it in the beginning before I started to get ready to come in, is did he roll down a hill or did he cross over, hit a pole, and then flip the car? So it's kind of confusing to figure out exactly what happened.
It's the latter, Colleen, I can tell you that. He crossed over from the northbound lanes through the center median, went through the southbound lanes, and ended up there on the embankment. And if we have, if Gil, can you hear me now? If it's possible for you to tilt up and give us a wider shot, you can really get a sense of the curve in this road if Gil is able to kind of pull out for us, because you can see there's sort of a bit of an S curve to Hawthorne Boulevard here. And as you tilt up, you can see that bend in the road. And this is something that neighbors in the area have talked to us about. There you can really see that S more, that cars do tend to travel, pick up speed going downhill as they're traveling northbound. We had one neighbor tell us that a very similar accident happened just a short time ago with a driver also heading northbound on these lanes, crossing that center divide, crossing the southbound lanes, and ending up on the embankment where we see the vehicle that Tiger was driving. And Gil, are you back with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
Oh, we can, yes.
Oh, great. Okay, we had a little bit of trouble there with our audio, but yeah, you're exactly right. You see that curve there, and it comes down. He was traveling on the Hawthorne Boulevard here on the left side of the screen. That, I mean, as I zoom in here, that lane there is the northbound side of Hawthorne Boulevard, and as he came through that curve, it kind of flattens out a little bit, and you'll see that center divider right here where the impact happened. Now, as we can see, as I come further down on the southbound side of the lanes, you see debris. I'm going to have my pilot slide to the left so we can see a little bit better, a clearer shot of where the car was going and traveling when it crashed. But here's where it entered that shoulder of the road, and you see how it just split right through the trees here and ended up right in that spot there. Right now, the tow truck or the heavy lift vehicle is lifting the vehicle out of that spot right now and is now actually onto the southbound lanes of Hawthorne Boulevard. But you can see that path that the car traveled, a very great distance. In fact, I'll come out to a wider shot so you can see once again, there's the center median where it crossed over and slid all this way onto the dirt, through the trees, and ending up in that clearing there. And now the car is now onto Hawthorne Boulevard.
How far is that closed, Gil? We heard it was closed in the area of the accident. Are you talking a couple miles here, a mile, a couple of blocks?
I would say it's at least a mile. It's stretching from Black Horse Road all the way to Palos Verdes Drive north. So it is a big distance there, at least a mile, maybe a little bit more.
And Gil, we are seeing they've made some progress as they've tried to move the vehicle off the embankment here and onto this, I guess, tow truck. I'm not quite sure if that's what I'm looking at, or is that still the crane that they use to move the vehicle?
Yeah, that's it right there. And let me come in a little tighter so you can see they've actually set it down on the fast lane there of the road. That's the southbound side. There it is. They've set it down there, and they have a tow truck at the weight here ahead of it, right there, a flatbed that they're going to bring in and put it on there.
And are you able to get a better sense now that it's upright as to the damage?
Yeah, let me push in here. In fact, we're going to try to slide in closer to it. I can ask my pilot to move forward. Here you can see all the damage on the back side of it, and it looks like the engine compartment has been pushed in quite a bit.
Well, but Colleen, I have to say, when you look at this, I mean, considering it rolled multiple times, the vehicle has held up remarkably well.
You know, it is interesting to look at the vehicle because really from the cabin back, it looks like there's not a whole lot of damage. But when you see the car resting on its side, and keep in mind it was resting on the driver's side, so when they got him out, they had to pull him through the windshield or through the passenger side. I believe it was the windshield. You look, the front end of the car appears to have a lot of damage.
Yeah, indeed it does.
Gil, are you still with us?
I am still here. It looks like the windshield, I believe they said they tried to extricate Tiger out of the windshield area. They did use the jaws of life, so there was going to be some damage to the car from that. But as you're saying, yes, you can see the extent of the damage there, especially at the front end.
Yeah, one point of clarification, we initially were told jaws of life. We later heard that they just had to pop the windshield in order to get him out. But as Colleen mentioned, the car was resting on the driver's side, so that perhaps was a bit more complicated. We do know this is the GV80. It's a brand new Genesis model that has 10 airbags on board. It appears many of them were deployed, as you would expect in a rollover crash like this. And certainly hoping that a lot of these safety features did their job in protecting Tiger. We do know that he is undergoing some surgery right now for multiple injuries to his legs, but the promising news that we heard was when first responders arrived on scene, he was conscious and able to communicate with them. So that is very good news to hear.
And we're hoping to get a briefing from the Sheriff's Department at 3 o'clock our time, and as soon as that happens, we'll carry it live. In the meantime, I believe we're going to go to Mario Solis, who has really covered Tiger Woods for a number of years here in L.A., and I loved what Todd said from the Golf Channel. He said that Tiger really urbanized golf. I mean, golf just didn't have the kind of following. Think about before Tiger. People were watching golf tournaments like they were Super Bowl parties once Tiger came along.
Yeah, that is very true. And the way people embrace golf, the generational change that took place when Tiger became so popular was incredible. You would see an older set, a more mature set of players on golf courses locally and internationally. But when Tiger became so popular, everyone wanted to be like Tiger. It was like the old commercial, everyone wants to be like Mike. Well, everyone wanted to be like Tiger Woods, and everyone adopted golf, whether it was just going out for 9 quick holes or playing 18. Everything just became different. Even the attire, the way people thought about golf, watching golf on TV. Prior to that, the viewership didn't even compare. So after Tiger took over, his dominance and his influence was so spectacular that, yeah, you're right, Colleen, everything completely changed.
His dominance, his influence, and then, Mario, we watched this incredible comeback of a few years ago that a lot of people just thought, oh, he probably won't ever win a major again. Well, some thought, but Tiger certainly had it in him and proved the doubters wrong.
As he's done so many times before, Tiger, it's been said before, never count him out. He's a fighter. He's a survivor. No matter how many shots behind the leader Tiger has been in so many tournaments, How many times have we not seen, here comes Tiger storming back and doing it once again? That's just the way he is. And of course, as you would expect, reaction from the sports community and golf in particular has been overwhelming. We talked earlier about Chicago Bulls and former UCLA star Zach LaVine tweeting, praying for Tiger. We have already gone through so much in 2020. Also, Lindsey Vonn, his former girlfriend, sending her best wishes. And we do have a soundbite from golfer Justin Thomas. During a press conference at the Workday Championship, truly heartbroken and having to hold back some tears. Here he is.
Let me check with my pilot.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sick to my stomach.
Do we have enough?
You know, it hurts to see one of your, I mean, now my closest friends, you know, get in an accident. And man, I just hope he's all right. Just worry for his kids. You know, I'm sure they're struggling.
His kids. Fortunately, we've heard encouraging news. Also, golfer Justin Rose saying that he had just seen the news and hoping the best for Tiger Woods. So the entire sports world, the golf community, waiting and hoping that Tiger Woods makes one more remarkable comeback.
You know, Carolyn and Mario, when you talk about his kids, that's the one picture that stays with you of him playing golf with his young son. And he almost took more delight. It was sort of that mentorship that we remember seeing with Tiger and his dad.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about that earlier, that incredible tournament where Tiger and 11-year-old son Charlie
there he is, right there.
played together. It was so fun to watch, and you're right, Colleen. It was almost as if Tiger was a kid once again, and he was having more fun than his son. Charlie seemed to be the adult, very focused, very concentrated on the match. When he made some good shots, he would just sort of take it in, whereas Tiger would laugh and smile. It was truly beautiful to watch that.
He's got the old Tiger game face, doesn't he?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, exactly what he's got. I mean, it's just, those are the images I think that so many of us are thinking about right now. And we've pointed out that on Tiger's Twitter feed, he lists himself as a father first, then a golfer and an entrepreneur. I mean, his family means so much, and it's just been so nice to be able to see this relationship that he's sharing with us, because of course, you know, he's been very private about his children, understandably, but for him to put this out there, it was really a lot of fun for everyone to see.
It was. All right, Mario, we're going to let you step away for a couple of minutes as you get more information from your sources in the sports world. I believe we're going to go back to Nurse Alice right now to perhaps, Nurse Alice, you can shed a little light on what you know so far. We've talked about the back surgeries that he's had. He's had several of them. He was, in fact, recovering from one back surgery. What do you know about the leg injuries right now? Is he out of surgery?
Well, I don't have that information as far as whether he's out of surgery, what the status is of his leg injuries. What I can tell viewers is when someone has a rollover car accident like this and they're taken to the hospital, there is a very meticulous assessment done. So although there may be some obvious injuries and some bleeding and bruising to one particular area, doctors and surgeons are and nurses are very meticulous about looking at every body system and every organ, because while you may see some broken bones, which look like some obvious injuries, and we can do x-rays, some of the things that do concern us that are hidden could be the swelling, internal bleeding, and other bruises, things that are going on with the lungs. So there's a lot that's going on as far as assessment-wise to make sure that there aren't any other injuries. So while we do know he's in surgery for his legs, I'm sure that the surgeons and the doctors and nurses there are being very meticulous at watching to check for any secondary injuries that could happen. So for example, with rollover injuries like this, we get concerned about, head injuries, traumatic brain injuries. As many rollovers as that happens, the brain can rattle in the head, and we may not see something right away, but in the subsequent hours, we may start to see some swelling or some bleeding that happens. So even when he comes out of surgery, I'm pretty sure there's going to be he's going to be in the ICU being monitored very closely for any other potential injuries that could happen later.
And Nurse Alice, you mentioned that he was taken to Harbor UCLA Medical Center. That is a trauma center, so he is really in the best place he can possibly be for treatment.
Absolutely. There are various levels of trauma centers, and Harvard UCLA is a level 1 trauma center. So they have surgeons and doctors and nurses of different specialties that can respond at the drop of a dime in the event of something like this. And they need to take someone to surgery right away. They have all the specialists ready to go on hand. So I trust that he's gone to an excellent place for services. I'm sure they have the best of the doctors working with him. And again, it's going to be kind of a wait and see, because while they may be if they're saying he's in surgery for his legs, there may be some broken legs, which I'll be honest, but the look of this picture, it's not questionable. I mean, you can see the extensive damage to the vehicle. It was mentioned that airbags were deployed, and while airbags are there to protect us, they can still cause some bruising and contusions and other things like that. But you know, I'm pretty sure that they're monitoring and looking for other things as well. Usually, and I've been in the trauma bay. I've worked trauma, ICU, ER trained, and I've seen, you know, the action that happens. And I have to tell you, in the trauma bay, there can be sometimes as many as up to 15, 20 people. Everyone has their designated role, but it's like an orchestra. Everyone has their role. They're checking everybody's system. They're documenting things. They're getting medications rolling. I'm sure one of the things here is, although Tiger was awake and talking to the first responders, once they got him to the trauma center, the first thing is, let's assess the injuries. Let's take care of those life-threatening, if any. Once they've ruled that out, let's keep them comfortable, and let's get going on the road to recovery. And that began with surgery, as they mentioned today. But even after he comes out of surgery, Tiger will have quite a road ahead of him as he then starts the process to rehabilitating, getting better, recovering, and rehabilitating. Because you know, just by looking at his vehicle, and I'm not there, and I'm not a part of his healthcare team, but just in my experience working in the trauma bay, working with physicians and seeing people come in, it can be, you know, sometimes the most subtle injuries can be the most devastating, and sometimes the most devastating injuries, you know, it's a broken bone, then they heal and they get better. So no 2 car accidents are ever the same.
All right, Nurse Alice, as we talk to you, we continue to look on the other side of your screen, a split screen here. This is the car that Tiger Woods was in when it rolled this morning. The good news there, it does have 10 airbags. So he had additional cushioning when the car did roll. Nurse Alice, we're going to switch away from you to Gordon Tokumatsu. He is just outside UCLA Harbor General right now with an update on the situation. What do we know, Gordon?
Well, Colleen, some very, very astute observations by Alice there, Nurse Alice, talking about what the first responders encountered as they arrived at the scene here. As we mentioned before, serious but not life-threatening. He was apparently conversing with some of the paramedics that arrived at the scene there. But that's very important because there may be shock involved as well, and Nurse Alice certainly could talk more about this. But shock during an accident can happen. It can also mask injuries that may be there that the first responders and ultimately the doctors here at the hospital may not know about until he is actually examined closely. So that's another thing that needs to be considered. Right out there at the field at the accident site, they have to stabilize him as quickly as possible. Once they realize, perhaps from talking with him, that he is Tiger Woods and that he did undergo extensive surgeries for his back problems, his disc issues, and his spine, that all has to be taken into consideration. It makes everything that much more difficult to operate on because of that instability, especially if it involves any other orthopedic parts, perhaps his limbs, his legs, his arms, that sort of thing. So as they brought him here, as we mentioned before, he was in serious condition. I do want to mention one other thing, if I may, and this is something that I pulled off of NBC Sports about golf, if I can talk about that, Colleen.
Please do.
Okay. All right. Well, this is something from NBC Sports, and I understand that at some point Tiger Woods himself had spoken about his admiration for Ben Hogan. You might recall he was another golf legend, very seriously injured in a crash in Texas in 1949. In fact, he was hit so hard by a bus it nearly killed him. But he lived to play again. In fact, he did very well. According to NBC Sports, Hogan's post-crash career was an incredible success. In the 50s, this is the next decade afterward, he won 11 times, including 6 major tournaments. So it is possible for somebody to recover from very, very serious accident injuries like this. And of course, that was in a completely different era. So obviously it's way too early to assess what the future holds for somebody like Tiger Woods. But he has the very best folks in the business, really, the medical profession, working on him here at Harbor UCLA right now, and his chances of surviving this, of actually recovering from all of this and his extensive injuries, as was pointed out by his agent, are fairly good at this point. That is the good news. And again, we are waiting for more word and specifics from the doctor.
The Kia K5 delivers style and performance at an incredible value. Drive one home with payments of just $119 per month during our President's Day event. That's just $119 per month for the stylish and fun to drive K5. Visit us, CarPro's Kia Glendale and CarPro's Kia Huntington Beach.
Truck. We did watch investigators hiking up to the area where the vehicle was, taking pictures of items that perhaps were thrown out of the vehicle. It was unclear at that time, but they were documenting carefully the scene. And as John just mentioned, obviously, they did check out the interior of this vehicle as well. The debris field from the crash, at least where the car crossed over that center median, hit a sign, and that sign flew quite a distance as the car then crossed over the southbound lanes and landed up on the embankment there. Gil Levis is in News Chopper 4 Bravo for us right now. Gil, this appears to be the final stages of removing the vehicle from the scene.
Carolyn, absolutely. You can see some debris that's preloaded onto the flatbed tow truck. You see it there as I zoom in, a lot of debris from the car itself. Now, I can tell you, as we were watching the sheriffs go through the car, they did collect a lot of items from inside the car. They put it into a large bag and took it into one of their patrol cars. They were taking pictures of the interior and the exterior. The deputies were definitely having a close look at the tires themselves. I watched one deputy looking closely at their front and rear tires as well. And again, the front windshield where Tiger was pulled out of, you can see the glass there on the hood. So a lot going on here in the last couple of minutes. They've wrapped up their investigation as far as collecting items from the car, and it's now on that tow truck.
All right, as we continue to look at the picture there, we're going to bring in Eric Leonard right now. Eric, you've been following the investigation since early on. We talk about this being a newer model car. Something interesting that I heard you say earlier was that this might have video or some sort of black box akin to what you would find on an airplane in a crash that might be able to shed some light on this.
Yeah, a lot of newer generation cars, and by that I mean really the last 5 or 10 years, but certainly this has picked up in the last 2 or 3 years. Crash investigators tell me that the cars have this thing called a data event logger or an event recorder, which keeps track through the car's computer of the last few minutes of the vehicle's operation prior to an impact that stopped it from operating. So that could be the road speed, the speed, RPMs of an engine if the car has an engine like this one. It could be the performance of an electric motor if it's an electric car, whether or not the brakes were engaged, the parking brake was engaged, the position of the steering wheel versus the position of the wheels themselves. A lot of these things can be collected depending on the sophistication, and certainly this looks like a really sophisticated new style of car. And it buffers that information constantly as somebody's driving, and then when there's an impact or an event, it freezes it, records it to memory, and then either collision investigators or in most cases, insurance companies are able to retrieve that information and learn a lot about what was happening in the car in those few minutes prior to an impact. Was it driving the speed limit? Was it driving faster than the speed limit? Did somebody brake before an impact or didn't they? And that kind of information is just invaluable. It's better than you could get from any witness. It's better than you can get from video of a collision because your video is not always focused exactly where you want, and this is coming directly from the vehicle that was involved. So that's going to be something that, if it exists, is going to be really a main focus of collision investigators. A lot of cars also have these 360-degree video cameras. Most of that has to do with helping the driver be aware of their surroundings when they're trying to park, especially parallel parking or park close to another object. There are a few cars, one collision investigator was telling me this afternoon, that capture that information along with the event data. I don't know if this one is one of them. We can certainly try to find out. But again, that kind of information just absolutely critical to investigators trying to figure this out. I should also mention that the LA County Sheriff's Department, which has responsibility for investigating this crash, has different tiers of crash investigations. You know, most car collisions involve two people, one person, and property damage only. And those are handled at the lowest tier. Sometimes a report is taken. All police agencies in California use a form that's produced by the California Highway Patrol, CHP, I think it's 555. They collect the basic information about everybody that's involved. As collisions go up in severity, meaning serious injuries, potential fatalities, and major property damage, or in collisions where there's the potential that a crime was either committed in the crash or as a result of the crash, they have, the Sheriff's Department has investigators that have more experience. LA County Sheriff's Department has a specific response team that will go out to certain investigations like this. Given the amount of time they've spent at the scene, it certainly seems like that's who's been called to this investigation. I'm sure the sheriff will give us some more specific information about it, but these are investigators who have the most experience looking at the wreckage of collisions and trying to sort out what happened, because when you get into these more serious events that involve serious injuries and fatalities, they don't want to leave anything to chance about what may have led to a crash. So it seems like, based on what we've seen so far, those are the kinds of investigators that have been brought out to this scene to apply that high level of sophistication, the most experience possible at looking into what happened here.
And we have certainly seen a number of investigators on scene since this crash happened at 7:12 this morning. We've been over it since about 11:30 and have seen a number of different investigators collecting evidence, making notations. Eric, you mentioned those parking cameras. We do know that this vehicle was equipped with those, so it'll be interesting to see if that information is recorded in some way. This vehicle is also equipped with something called driver attention warning, and on the website for the Genesis GV80, it says, while you might not always realize when you're fatigued or distracted, driver attention warning can help alert you. It's able to analyze various driving patterns and such. So this car certainly had a lot of bells and whistles on it. Colleen mentioned 10 airbags in place, and we can see so many of them deployed in this rollover crash.
Do you know, before Eric leaves, I want to ask, do we know where Tiger was going at this hour of the morning? Do we know if there are witnesses?
We don't know specifically where he was going. We can assume there were some witnesses because we know that there was another very minor traffic incident that happened as people pulled to the side of the road to try to call for help or provide assistance to the person in this car, who we now know is Tiger Woods, right after the crash happened. One thing that will be interesting to hear is the exact chronology of the events today. It's not exactly clear how soon those people stopped after the incident? Did they eyewitness the crash, or did they find the wreckage while driving by? And then there was some time period that elapsed between those 911 calls when sheriff's deputies got to the scene, were told they were first on scene, and then another lapse of time before firefighters got there and they were able to remove him. Just very preliminary information from some of the fire department records suggests that firefighters spent about 10 minutes between the time they got to the scene, the time they got him out of the car. That's not a prolonged rescue, although it sure looks like one that involved some kind of technical help, whether that was prying the windshield off or doing something else. It sounds like they're going to provide us with some additional information about that. But there's also the possibility that this happened prior to those cars pulling over, and Tiger Woods might have been stuck in the wreck for some period of time before someone showed up and was able to call for help. We're not clear yet on whether he was able to call for help himself. Judging by the severity of the crash, it is possible that he couldn't reach a cell phone and had no ability to call. So that timeline, I think, is going to be interesting as they explain what they know about the investigation so far.
Indeed it will, and we expect that news conference in about 15 minutes. Right now, though, we do want to share what we were able to glean from dispatch audio shortly after the crash. Let's listen.
Hey, let me hear you. It's going to be on the southbound traffic lanes between TV Drive North, Silver Spur. Can I get a unit to go ahead and start blocking off southbound traffic from TV Drive North? Acer 173 Audible, take that. Acer, those cars, the last ones, you have all southbound traffic blocked off from Hawthorne and North. Copy, thank you. Hey, 170 David, we are going to need a tow, please. Hey, ma'am, do we have an ETA for fire? We have a rollover with someone trapped.
Just got off the phone with them. Let me call them back.
Hey, I'm going to need a unit to accompany the ambulance transport to HGH, please.
There we've been listening to the conversation between firefighters and dispatch here. We're going to bring in Gil Levis right now, who's over the scene once again for us. Gil, before we talk about what we're seeing right now, what are the weather conditions out there? I know as someone who flies a lot, you're checking that all the time. Is it possible it was foggy on this road this morning?
I doubt it. Because of the winds that we've had in the last couple of days, it's very clear. I really doubt that there was any fog in the area because of the temperature and location. Okay. But again, it looks like it may have been clear lanes. You know, the surprising thing and the amazing thing is that the car crossed over onto the oncoming side of Hawthorne Boulevard and then made its way into the bushes here. And that's what we're going to look at right now. We're seeing the deputies in the area. In fact, this is where the car ended up on its side, and you can see some of the deputies assisted by the tow truck drivers searching for other parts from the car. You see this fellow here carrying some items, and they take it over to the secondary tow truck and put it in there. So they're searching the wreckage area and where the car came through. In fact, let me come across here and show you the path one more time so you can see this is where it ended up, and you see how the brush here has been flattened out by the car that just came rolling through this area right off of the street here. This is where it entered the, you can see the marks there on the dirt. This is where it entered the shoulder of the road, and then it came from this direction here, the bird flying there through the shot, right through the center median there, and it looks like that's where the crash started at this point. So quite a distance away, and right now the deputies are searching that area for any debris that they could find.
Yeah, and as terrible as this crash was, I mean, and we could see by the damage done to the vehicle, it could have been even worse, because as that vehicle crossed into the southbound lanes, you know, there could have been a head-on collision. That didn't happen. You showed us the entry point of the tire marks as the car crossed over the southbound lanes and headed up the embankment there, and you can see just how close that power pole is to those tire marks. I mean, had he been just over a bit, he could have slammed into that power pole, which would have had a horrendous outcome. So there were so many things about this that ended up with the car rolling over and not hitting some of these other major obstacles.
Well, you're right about that, Carolyn. Yeah. It's one of the first things you see is the power pole there and how close he came to that, and the power lines, which would have been, you know, made the situation even worse. Gil, as we focus back on the tow truck there, they've got it on the flatbed. Are they about ready to pull out of there? Is that what it looks like?
Yes, it's definitely on the flatbed. They did tow it up onto there. They have secured it, and it's just a matter of time before they roll it away. I think they're searching for the extra debris that might be in the bushes right now. So at this point, it looks like they're ready to roll with the car.
And it does look like they've collected most of the debris that was in the street at this point. You know, Gil, you had showed us there was a sort of a sign post in that center median. Earlier, we had seen the sign that was across the road. I'm not sure if that's what that investigator is carrying right now, but we had seen that blown about 50 yards from where that signpost was.
Yeah, I think that might be part of that signpost, but I can come back out again and show you just the great distance here. I'm going to keep the heavy lift vehicle at the bottom of your screen, and at the top of your screen you see that the center median where it opens up. That's where the car initially hit, right in this area here, and traveled all that distance onto the south side of Hawthorne Boulevard, missing that pole right into here. You see the markings there on the dirt, and then right through a bunch of trees and bushes here, ending up right about in this area here.
And the other point of interest here is that we do not see any skid marks on those southbound lanes at all.
Now, we were looking for it. I believe my colleague Megan Reyes had mentioned that there were no skid marks leading up to that. You had mentioned that there's a curve in the area just up ahead. I'll come out wider so you can see that curve once again. It's kind of straightened out where the accident happened, but there's the S-turn right there. That's near Peninsula High School, that S-turn there, and then it starts going downhill from that point. And I heard someone mention maybe a 6 to 8 degree downgrade on that curve there. So that's the point of the contact with the center divider, right past the pole and then into the bushes.
You know, as we continue to look at your shot here, what we're looking at is a lone microphone here. We're awaiting a press conference, a briefing at 3 o'clock this afternoon from the LA County Sheriff's Department, and hoping they'll shed more light on what happened out there on Hawthorne Boulevard this morning, 7:12, almost 7:15 this morning, the accident with Tiger Woods. Again, the split screen, you see the live shot of investigators going through there, and once again, in just 10 minutes, we hope to have more information from Sheriff Villanueva. Yeah, we're awaiting that news conference. The sheriff's deputies were the first on the scene. They, in fact, tweeted out that this accident involved Tiger Woods. We got that word just before 11:30 this morning. The accident itself happened at 7:12 this morning. And as you heard Eric Leonard describing, we're not entirely clear how long it took for first responders to arrive on scene. But Hawthorne Boulevard is a frequently traveled road. We were speaking to one of the neighbors in the area, and he told us that even during the pandemic, there's a good fair amount of traffic on this road. And he also shared with us that he had witnessed the results of a similar accident just a couple months ago, where a car was heading northbound on Hawthorne Boulevard, picked up some speed, and had crossed over that center divide through the southbound lanes and ended up in the embankment here, similar to what happened to Tiger, Colleen. Yeah, you know, it's we keep hearing it's a dangerous stretch there, and I want to remind people that the information we heard, that conversation from dispatch, we just heard from Eric Leonard, that's LA County Sheriff's Department, not firefighters who were on scene there. So that's the information that that we have and what we heard from sheriff's deputies who showed up and found out that it was Tiger Woods there. Yeah, and they've been on the scene ever since, collecting evidence both in the street here that was left behind. We noticed them, you know, very carefully mapping everything out, taking pictures, and then we did see within the last half an hour the vehicle finally moved from its location. And obviously, we can see that Hawthorne Boulevard is still shut down in both directions as this investigation continues. And that's one of the things that's a bit unusual about this, that the investigation has been going on since just after 7 this morning. You know, we're working as well to get some information, some more information on Tiger's condition. We know, according to his agent, he was brought in with multiple leg injuries. We know they were doing surgery, and we do know where he is. We're hoping, obviously, with HIPAA restrictions and privacy laws, they have to release. They have to go through the family to release information on his condition. But we're hoping to hear at 3 o'clock. o'clock when we hear from the Sheriff's Department, maybe a little bit of information on Tiger Woods' condition at this point.
And one of the things, Colleen, that so many people are very concerned about, we're hearing about multiple leg injuries that he suffered and that he is having surgeries on both legs. But a lot of people are wondering what's going on with his back, because we know Tiger has had 5 back surgeries, the most recent just a few months ago, and he was in the process of a very, serious rehabilitation from that most recent surgery, with his eye on playing in the Masters in 7 weeks. And this weekend, when he was hosting his Genesis golf tournament at the Riviera Country Club, he talked a little bit about that and said he was, feeling a little stiff, hoping to be better in 7 weeks' time to play. So we did hear him kind of backing off a bit from his ability to play. He said he was awaiting one more MRI before he'd get full clearance to really ramp up his training, and we assume, getting back on the course. So a lot of concern as well about, what's going on with his back at this point.
We talked about the trajectory of the car and how he had barely missed a power pole out there. It hit the median, hit a sign. I'm interested, Gil, as we look at your picture here, how close is the nearest house there? I mean, he was very fortunate. He ended up, I guess, in sort of an open area.
Absolutely. In fact, there's the point of contact with the center divider, and the car traveled in this direction into the bushes. Eventually, they're past that power pole, and then you can see the homes there on the hillside where the car ended up. We're adjusting our position right now with my pilot. We're going to work to get into a better position, but you can see the homes very close by where the accident occurred, or where the car ended up. So the homes were very, very close.
Yeah, indeed. Well, we want to bring in Mario Solis right now. And Mario, you've had a chance to interview Tiger over the years. You're getting reaction from the sporting world on this as well.
Yes, indeed. We have additional reaction from the golf community. We have comment from golfer Tony Finau, who is in Bradenton, Florida at the Workday Championship. So here's Tony Finau.
Yeah, I mean, I saw the condition of his car, and for me, it was we just hope that he's okay. That's the biggest reaction, really. A little bit of shock. Something crazy happened to our sports world last year with Kobe. So, I wouldn't say that dramatic of feelings, but man, you just hope Tiger's all right, and we all know he's a strong cookie physically, mentally. So if someone's going to get through this, he will, and be back for the better, I'm sure.
Been watching this tournament my whole life. Why I fell in love with golf. Wow, I didn't think I'd be like this. Tiger, another reason I'm into golf. Had good feelings this week. Been playing great. City of Champions, Dodgers, Lakers, me now, so it's a weird feeling.
So these two players actually had a sudden death over the weekend at the Genesis Invitational. You'll recall that Finau finished second at the Genesis Invitational at Riviera, that is hosted by Tiger Woods. Finau lost in sudden death to Max Homa, who you just heard from, and he received a trophy from Tiger. You could tell that he was tearful. He was very emotional, and saying that that's really the reason why he started playing golf at such a young age. He attended Riviera all the time for the tournament, which has gone through different names, and actually saying that it was a dream come true, spending those moments with Tiger Woods.
And that's what we're hearing from so many people. Mario, we're going to break away from you and follow this shot. This is the car as it's being towed away. Tiger is the reason I am into golf. He inspired so many generations. Let's go topside right now to Gil Levis. Gil, still on Hawthorne, or where are they going? Gil Levis, can you hear me?
Yes, I do hear you. Do you copy me?
Sure do.
Okay. Yeah, we're on Hawthorne Boulevard southbound at Silver Spur Road. They're going to wait here for a turn. It's going to be a left-hand turn or possibly a U-turn. So, yes, the vehicle has left the crash scene.
And a lot of investigation will be taking place with this vehicle, of course, once it gets to where it's going, and it's something that we're going to continue to follow for you. In the next few minutes, we are expecting a news conference from Sheriff Alex Villanueva, and of course we will bring that to you just as soon as we have it. Colleen, I noticed just how emotional Max Homa was in that interview, that was just shared by Mario Solis. You know, these are players who are so impacted by Tiger Woods as he got into golf because of Tiger.
Well, so many people not only looked up to him as a player, but looked up to him for what he did outside the game.
Yep.
He ran so many charitable
that
organizations.
We're going to have, basically, Captain Mendoza's going to come out and introduce the speakers. We're just going to have the 2 speakers today, but we are going to do it because we know there'll be a lot of questions. You know, it's an active investigation, so there's only so much they can share at this point. But so that you're aware, it will be the statements from the sheriff and then the chief, the fire chief, and then we're going to go into Spanish language remarks, and then we will go into the Q&A. Okay? So we'll be starting hopefully on time. We understand that a number of you are going live at 3, so we're going to try to be as fast as we can.
Okay, we're just listening. We are less than 2 minutes away from that that presser or that briefing from the sheriff, and as you heard, the fire chief as well. You know, Carolyn, back to your thought there. You know, again, he really gave people the freedom to pick up a club, people who might have been afraid to do so before. I loved what Todd from the Golf Channel said when he said he really urbanized golf. So you would see so many people out, you know, playing, and it, you know, you always think you have to be a scratch golfer or somebody who can actually play to go out there. Not so because of Tiger. He just inspired so many.
Oh, he did indeed, and that foundation just celebrating its 25th year, and it made such a difference, is continuing to make such a difference in so many young people's lives who've been able to go on to college with scholarships from that foundation, and just sharing the passion of golf. You talked about it urbanizing golf, and Tiger truly did that, and inspired so many of us to take an interest in the game because he's so much fun to watch.
He really is. You know, I mentioned this earlier, but the one thing I noticed whenever there was a Tiger event, people were watching. There were like Super Bowl parties anymore.
Yeah.
You know, you'd go to the Golf Channel and people would sit around and watch Tiger play, and he was the big draw. Granted, you know, the Ryder Cup, the Masters, a lot of people watch them all the time. But people who never before turned on the Golf Channel would watch because of Tiger Woods.
Yeah, indeed. And we're now watching as the vehicle continues its journey away from the crash scene. Tiger Woods taken from the scene just after 7 this morning to Harbor UCLA Medical Center, where he is recovering from severe injuries to his legs. That's what his agent has shared with us, that he underwent surgery for that at UCLA. And we are awaiting a news conference from Sheriff Alex Villanueva any moment now.
You know, I'm just reading a quote here, and I'm trying to figure out who it's from, but amidst all the unbelievable successes of Tiger Woods, perhaps the most significant, important achievement is, and I'm going to say it in just a couple of words, Tiger made golf cool. He really did. It was not your dad's game anymore. You know, it was okay as a young person to pick up a club, and it really crossed not only generations but sex. You see a lot of young women who are inspired by Tiger to get out and play as well.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, he really did make it cool. And, you know, just 3 years ago, Colleen, when he came back and won the Masters, what a moment that was. Here was someone who at that point had recovered from 4 back surgeries. A lot of people questioning whether he could ever rise to the top of the game anymore. And Tiger certainly proved any doubters wrong with that incredible victory, and a victory made even more sweet with his children by his side. I mean, the emotions surrounding that. We see Sheriff Alex Villanueva just taking to the podium right now, Colleen.
Yes, let's listen in.
Yes. Oh, you'll handle? You'll handle? All right. He's got it? He's got it. Thank you, sir. Good afternoon. I'm Joe Mendoza, captain of the Sheriff's Information Bureau. Thank you for coming to this press conference to discuss a traffic collision which occurred this morning involving Aldrich Tiger Woods. Joining Sheriff Villanueva is Lomita Station Captain James Powers and other members of the executive command staff. Also joining us here today is LA County Fire Chief Gerald Osby. Now I would like to introduce the Sheriff of Los Angeles County, Alex Villanueva.
Thank you, Captain Mendoza. Today at 7:12 in the morning, Lomita Sheriff Station received a call of a solo vehicle collision in Harbor or Hawthorne Boulevard, north of Palos Verdes Drive. We arrived on scene at 7:18 a.m. and discovered a solo vehicle collision and The sole occupant was, again, Tiger Woods, and deputies at the time, they did not see any evidence of impairment, anything that of concern. Obviously, the life-saving measures that had to be taken for the occupant of the vehicle, and Chief Osby will speak to that regard. And it was a solo vehicle. Unfortunately, during the course of the investigation of this, there was another traffic collision that happened with people being looky-loos. But that, thankfully, there was no injuries associated with that. The vehicle traveled several hundred feet from the center divider at the intersection and rested on the west side of the road in the brush. Sustained major damage to the vehicle. You've seen all the images of that. And with that, our Lomita Sheriff's Station will be conducting the traffic investigation, and it'll take from days to several weeks to get the whole thing together. Once the investigation is completed, we will provide a detailed report. It'll be available, based on Public Record Act request, and we will not discuss it any further after that point. But at this point, I want to introduce Chief Darrell Osby, LA County Fire Department.
Good afternoon. I'm Fire Chief Darrell Osby of the Los Angeles County Fire Department. At approximately 7:22 this morning, resources from Los Angeles County Fire Station 106 received a report of a solo vehicle accident at the intersection of Hawthorne Boulevard and Palos Verdes Drive North in Rolling Hills Estates. Upon arrival of the scene of the incident with sheriffs on scene, resources and personnel from the Los Angeles County Fire Department observed a single rollover vehicle incident with one person trapped. The person trapped was extricated by the Los Angeles County Fire Department personnel. Earlier, it was stated that the jaws of life was utilized to extricate the person trapped. It was later determined by our personnel that a Halligan tube, which is used for prying, and an axe was also used to pry the person free from the vehicle. The person was packaged at the incident in stable condition with serious injuries, and because of the fact that they needed to be extricated, they were transported to Harbor UCLA Hospital. Because of the extrication, and Harbor Hospital is also a trauma center. As indicated earlier, there was also a second vehicle accident with no injuries. Thank you.
And the vehicle involved is a 2021 Genesis. It's a mid-size SUV. Para Español, a las 7:12 de la mañana en la calle Hawthorne, rumbo al norte, por la intersección de Palos Verdes Drive, hubo un accidente automovilístico de un solo vehículo donde el vehículo volcó varias veces y cayó a las orillas del lado oeste de esa intersección. Y el ocupante era el golfista Tiger Woods. Y fue
Okay, so Colleen, as they continue the statements in Spanish, we will be monitoring this, and we will come back for the question period because, of course, there's a lot more questions that we have.
Yeah, the couple of big takeaways that we've gotten so far, and we got this from Chief Osby, was that firefighters did have to extricate him from the vehicle. We knew that. They actually had to use an axe at one point in order to get him out.
Yeah, and as you said, we had that indication because we did see the windshield had been removed from the car. He explained that initially reports went out that the jaws of life were used, but that, in fact, was not the case. They were able to get him out by removing the windshield and getting him out. But Colleen, as you noted before, the vehicle had landed on the driver's side, so that no doubt made things a little bit more complicated.
Let's listen back into the sheriff.
Well, if the deputies arrive on scene, there's a vehicle that's rolled over, there's someone inside the vehicle, they can't remove them. Obviously, that's. Was he unconscious or conscious? We'll leave it at that. He was alive and he was conscious, and that's the extent of that. What about the evidence of the impairment? You said there was no evidence. There was no evidence of impairment. So subsequent to that, we're not going to make any. There was no effort to draw blood, for example, at the hospital. Nothing was removed from the scene or found at the scene? No evidence of impairment at this point in time. But I'll let Chief Osby.
Chief Osby,
Good morning.
Was Tiger Woods conscious when you got there? Did he say anything to the paramedics who arrived? And can you tell us a little bit more, if we didn't use the jaws of life, how exactly did that extrication process take place?
Okay, the information I got back from my personnel and the things that they do is they would do a scene assessment. It was brought to my attention that he was conscious. Now, exactly what was said is unknown, but he was conscious. Our personnel make an assessment to make a determination of their level of consciousness, make sure that they're breathing, control any serious bleeding, and then control and address any serious injuries. It was brought to my attention that he had serious leg injuries, and that was assessed at the incident. The jaws of life are used as part of a package to extricate people that are trapped in vehicles. But it was later determined and brought to the attention that the jaws of life were not used to extricate Tiger Woods. We used a halogen tool, which is a tool used for prying, and we also used an axe to pry him from the vehicle. He was taken from the vehicle with a collar and backboard for spinal precautions. He was had the proper splints. Because of the nature of the incident being a solar vehicle rollover and the fact that it required an extrication that met trauma center criteria, the nearest trauma center to the area is Harbor UCLA Hospital, where he was transported in serious but stable condition.
Which leg?
That I do not know. It was my understanding that he had serious injuries to both legs.
Both legs. Chief, this was his decision to go to Harbor UCLA, or you took him to the closest emergency room. Given his condition at the time, was it that severe? That's what you had to do?
The determination of where to be transported was made by the paramedics and the captain unseen. The reason that Tiger Woods was transported to Harbor UCLA Hospital is because it's a trauma center criteria. Because of the nature of the incident, it was a solo roller vehicle and the damage to the vehicle, and then it also required him to be extricated. That's one of the criteria that meets trauma center criteria. Therefore, he was transported to the nearest trauma center, which is Harbor UCLA Hospital.
Was he airlifted, and can you tell us if he had injuries anywhere other than his legs, and were any of those injuries critical?
It was he was not airlifted. There were no other life-endangering injuries to my knowledge.
Sheriff, in a way of a question, if you would. I know it's a little early. The investigators haven't done all their stuff on that, but any indication of the speed at the time that the vehicle lost control over the center divider? All the reporters here have talked to neighbors saying you're going down that hill, you take your foot off the brakes, you're at 50 plus before you know it. Any indication how fast that vehicle may have been going at the time it flipped?
Well, at the time it made, it crossed the center divider to the point that it rested was several hundred feet away. So obviously that indicates they were going at a greater speed than normal. However, because it is downhill, it slopes, and it curves. That area has a high frequency of accidents. It's not uncommon.
Any skid marks or anything which indicated that he tried to brake or stop?
No skid marks, no braking. So apparently the first contact was with the center median, and from there then crossed into the opposing lane of traffic, hit the curb, hit a tree, and there was several rollovers during that process.
They haven't given you any kind of a preliminary indication in excess of 45, 50, 55 miles an hour?
That they're going to have to figure that one out. That's why the traffic investigators make the big bucks that they make.
Sheriff, what can you tell us about his condition now? Are you still in touch with Mr. Woods' team?
We've reached out. We've been in touch with his manager, and they don't want to release anything on his condition right now.
We hear that he's out of surgery and perhaps been moved to his own room, Sheriff?
All we know that a serious condition as a result of the accident, and that's about all they want to say.
You looking at weather as a factor in this accident, Sheriff Villanueva?
Weather is not a factor. Well, we arrived on scene at 7:18. They were notified within 4 minutes, and
we got the call from the Sheriff Department at approximately 7:22 this morning. Our resources arrived on scene at approximately 7:28. I don't have the information right now in relation to how long it took to extricate him from the vehicle.
Do you have any indication if there were drugs or medications involved? Why he was heading that way?
No.
Who called it in? Did someone call 911, a bystander? And is there any indication of
We had a neighbor called 911. That's how the call was received at the station. No evidence of impairment this time. That'll be subject to the investigation. Well, we're looking at signs of under the influence of either narcotics, medication, alcohol, odor of alcohol, all these different things that would give you an idea in their behavior, but there was none present. That, now we're going beyond what we have at the time, so that'll take, the investigators will have to figure that one out.
I understand some vehicles now have essentially a black box that reports certain information about how fast the car is going, did airbags deploy, telemetry, that sort of thing. Did this vehicle have that? Will you get information from that in the investigation?
The investigators will be able to, if they have it, they'll be able to have that and download it, and that will give us a good idea.
Was any of Tiger's team following the vehicle? Was this him solo?
Not that we're aware of.
Sheriff, you said that he was conscious, I believe. Was he able to communicate how much pain he was in, whether or not, was he able to communicate at all?
He was able to communicate, and he was conscious. I'll leave it at that. La velocidad no sabemos cuánto es, pero era considerable según el punto de partida de donde cruzó la parte mediana de la calle y donde cayó al otro lado eran varios cientos de pies. Y obviamente eso es una velocidad acelerante que se necesita para cubrir esa distancia. Hay una curva y está cuesta abajo a la misma vez.
Sheriff, do you know how long he was in the car before 911 arrived? Did he say at all how long he'd been waiting?
Okay, as we
Well,
listen,
we got the call at 7:12, and that came from the neighbors.
as we listen to the
let's listen back,
yes,
Colleen.
I was
He's
gonna
back in
say.
English now.
It happened because the neighbors, they're sitting right within 50 feet of the location. So
they saw the crash happen.
if they didn't see it, they heard it because it's literally happened right at their doorstep.
This is a courtesy car that he was driving, a Genesis courtesy car, correct?
That is correct.
And is it possible that Mr. Woods was on the phone when this accident occurred? Or is this one of the factors that we're going to be considering?
That's something we'll have to explore. The investigators will have to ascertain that if it was distracted driving.
Can you describe how the axe and the special tool were used to extricate from the vehicle? I mean, as far as the doors go, I mean, how were the tools used for this process?
As it pertains to the vehicle, as articulated earlier, it was a rollover accident, and so Tiger Woods was trapped inside the vehicle. So our firefighters and our firefighter paramedics used the pry bar, they call it Halligan tool, and an axe to pry parts of the vehicle away from him, so they were able to safely extricate him from the vehicle.
At what point did you realize it was Tiger Woods? Did he identify himself? Did they check his license? How did you know who it was?
They recognized him, and he identified himself as well.
Sheriff, did you say no blood was drawn at the scene from Tiger?
No, we don't have that capability, nor do we want it.
Sheriff, but the accident crime scene has taken a long time. It's been there now for several hours. Just moving the car now. Is there a reason so much time has been taken at this crime scene? Are there certain factors you're looking at? Are there certain pieces of evidence you're hoping to find? Or is it simply the fact that this is Tiger Woods and this is the way we're going to handle it?
Well, any serious accident of this nature is going to take time. It usually takes hours, and removing the vehicle is one of the last steps, and they've done all their markers, taken all their measurements, gathered up all the stuff, and then 3 or 4 hours is pretty normal, actually.
The celebrity component is not playing a factor?
I don't think that'll play a factor in it.
Would the neighbors approach him, like checking on his well-being? Did they like make it to the site and actually make contact with him?
No, they did not. No, there's a bluff. They're sitting about 20 feet above the place where the vehicle came to arrest.
Hey, Sheriff, can you talk a little bit about if he was able to stand after he was taken out? Was he able to take a couple of steps? Can you talk a little bit about what that looked like?
He was not able to get up, no. That was not an option.
Did Tiger Woods ask you to contact anyone for him? Did he ask you to contact a specific member of his family or a specific member of his team that was here for the golf tournament at this point?
At a later time at the hospital.
At the hospital he did, but not at the scene.
I'm sorry, sir. Can you clarify?
He did at the hospital, but not at the scene.
He asked you to contact
Yes.
a member of his family.
Who was it?
A member of his team.
Oh, a member of his team.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Can you talk about the conditions inside the car?
Huh?
Can you talk about the conditions inside the car? Was he trapped? Was he able to move at all?
Well, the interior of the cabinet of the vehicle was more or less intact. The front end was totally destroyed. The bumpers, everything was destroyed. Airbags deployed, all of that. And however, thankfully, the interior was more or less intact, which kind of gave him the cushion to survive what's otherwise would have been a fatal crash. Sí.
Platicaban también los vecinos del área de que en esa bajada hay coches que pierden control, que no son conocidos del área, gente ajena.
Eso es muy cierto.
So as he answers a question or two in Spanish here, Colleen, you know, we are hearing that he really felt that this was, front end was destroyed of this car, but the interior did manage to remain intact in what otherwise could have been a fatal accident.
Yeah, we heard a lot of very interesting information. He said that Tiger was conscious, and we heard from Chief Osby as well that he definitely had serious leg injuries. They took him out, they put a collar on him, put him on a backboard, and then transported him to Harbor UCLA because it's a Trauma 1 center.
And once he arrived at the hospital, we're told he did ask to speak or to alert someone on his team to the injury. So we know he was communicative both on the scene and at the hospital. We also heard the sheriff talk about no skid marks in the area, no braking. He said weather was not a factor here, and that there are a high frequency of accidents in this area because of that S curve and that downhill slope where cars tend to pick up speed.
Yeah, he actually said, you know, just to picture this in your mind. Now, you've seen the scene out there. You've seen where the SUV ended up. He said initially he hit a curb, then he hit a tree, and then there were several rollovers. And as you pointed out, Carolyn, the front end damage, according to the sheriff, quoting here, totally destroyed. However, the interior was intact, and that may have been because, as we've been noting, there are at least 10 airbags on this particular SUV.
And as far as sort of the timeline of this goes, the call came from neighbors who live above where the car landed. That came in around 7:12. Sheriff's deputies arrived on scene at 7:18. They in turn called for the fire department. County Fire was able to arrive on scene at 7:28. Chief Osby mentioned that they came to the scene with jaws of life, but didn't end up using them, used an axe and a tool for prying him open.
Also interesting, I thought, right away they noted there were no life-endangering injuries. All right, the sheriff's back in English. Let's listen in.
He's coming down off of a hill. Speed, we think, is a factor. What's the first thing he hits when he loses control and goes over the hill? Can you kind of walk us through the sequence of events there?
From what I understand, the first thing was when he made contact with the center media, and it would be the "Welcome to Rolling Hills Estate" sign. And that's in the center median. There's actually two signs. He hit the first one, the southernmost of those two signs, and then he winds up going across southbound lanes into the brush on the other side.
And he hit the tree, is that correct?
Yes, there's a tree about 8-inch stump, and that one was sheared.
Sure. You talked about the fact that he communicated to you. Can you describe to us his pain threshold at the time? This is a man who has to be rushed into surgery today, and his legs are damaged. Was he in shock? Was he in tears? Was he in excruciating pain? How can you describe his reaction to those who first go?
I would leave that up to Chief Osby on that one.
Generic question.
Good luck with that.
Yeah. Once again, Daryl Osby, Fire Chief, Los Angeles County Fire Department. I can't respond to the specifics of Tiger Woods. I mean, some of those questions are personal and need to be released from him or whomever's representing him. The only thing I can tell you from my experience of working in public safety for the past almost 4 decades, that anytime you're involved in a single vehicle accident like this with rollover and that level of damage and broken legs and lacerations, that you're going to be in severe pain.
What was your concern then, Chief, when he was injured and you're transporting him? How concerned were those paramedics to get him to the hospital in a certain amount of time?
The fact of the matter is that he was a serious condition, but he was stable enough to transport to a trauma center. If the injuries are more dramatic and they couldn't control an airway, then they would have transported him to the nearest facility. But the fact that he was stable enough to be transported to a hospital farther away, which was the most appropriate hospital to be transported for because of the nature of the injuries, the nature of the incident says that it was a very serious injury. He met trauma center criteria, but he wasn't so serious that he needed to be transported to the nearest hospital for immediate life-saving procedures.
Chief, there's an LA County fire captain who says that he was able to stand as they assisted him out of the vehicle. Is there any truth to this idea that he was able to stand?
I cannot respond to that statement. I don't know.
I will.
Chief, just to clarify, is he still at that same trauma center now, or has he been transferred anywhere else?
It's my understanding that he's still at the Harbor UCLA Hospital, and no statement has been allowed for release yet, to be released yet.
Actually, before Deputy Gonzalez was actually the first deputy on scene, so he can perhaps clarify some of the questions that you may have. Go ahead, Deputy.
Good afternoon. I'm Deputy Gonzalez. I'm assigned to Lomita Sheriff Station. I'm the handling Deputy Carlos Gonzalez. I was the first unit on scene, and I'm the handling deputy for the for this current traffic collision.
Deputy Gonzalez, could you speak to that question? There's an LA County fire captain who says that Tiger Woods was able to stand as they assisted him out of the vehicle. Is there any truth to the idea that he was able to stand?
Unfortunately, Mr. Woods was not able to stand under his own power. Our partners at LA County Fire were able to extricate him from the vehicle, and they put him onto a backboard. When I arrived on scene, Mr. Woods was seated in the driver's seat. I made contact with him, and I ensured that he was able to speak to me. At that time, he seemed that as though he was still calm and lucid. I made the determination that it would be safer to wait for LA County Fire to help remove him instead of trying to remove him myself. I kept Mr. Woods calm until LA County Fire arrived on scene.
What did you do to keep him calm, Deputy?
I spoke to him. I asked.
Conversation. Can you share it with us, please?
I asked him what his name was. He told me his name was Tiger, and at that moment I immediately recognized him. I asked him if he knew where he was, what time of day, just to make sure he was oriented. He seemed as though he was lucid and calm.
Was he concerned about his injuries?
He didn't seem concerned of his injuries at the time, which is not uncommon in traffic collisions. Many times people tend to be in shock. It's a traumatic experience, so it's not uncommon for people to be focused on unimportant things, or even if they are in pain, they might not feel it until much later.
So was the incident caught on your body cam?
Yes, my body camera was used per department policy.
Deputy, in the photos of the airbags, there's blood. We're trying to figure out everything that we're seeing. Did you see any injuries on anywhere other than the legs as you were just assessing him on site?
I did observe injuries. I can't speak as to the nature of the injuries. I'm not a trained medical professional, so I can't speak to that. What I can say is that he was injured, and he was successfully removed and taken to the hospital.
And you saw that he had a seatbelt on?
He was wearing a seatbelt.
Did he have lacerations as well as the leg injury?
If he did, I was not able to see them due to his clothing.
You've seen a lot of car accidents. Do you think this type of car saved his life, or do you think like a cheaper car wouldn't have had a good?
As mentioned by the sheriff, that specific stretch of roadway is one of our trouble spots. Our locals in Rancho Palos Verdes and Rolling Hills Estates know that it's a hot spot for traffic collisions as well as speed. In my experience as a deputy who is traffic trained and works a traffic car, I have seen many collisions. The nature of his vehicle, the fact that he was wearing a seatbelt, I would say that it greatly increased the likelihood that it saved his life.
Is this the worst accident you've seen on that stretch?
I will say no, because I've been doing this for a while and I've seen fatal traffic collisions. So I will say that it's very fortunate that Mr. Woods was able to come out of this alive.
Deputy Gonzalez, this is an accident-prone stretch, correct? We've seen a number of accidents on this specific stretch. Is that correct?
This stretch of roadway is downhill. It's sweeping. Speeds there. The speed limit is 45 miles per hour. Myself, when I'm doing speed enforcement, I will sometimes catch people going 80 plus miles per hour. So it's more of a thing that this, people see a nice stretch of road and maybe they're not watching their speedometer, or maybe they're in a hurry.
In your conversations with Tiger, were you ever concerned in the time that you spent with him of his pain threshold, or that he was going to lose consciousness at all?
At the moment that I spoke to Mr. Woods, I was able to determine that it would have been safer for me to wait for LA County Fire because his condition seemed stable, and I did not want to risk further injuring him by trying to remove him myself. So the neighbor that lives behind heard the collision and came down and was the one that directed me to the vehicle. As was indicated by the sheriff, there was another unrelated traffic collision that occurred several feet down the roadway, which I believe was due to people trying to look. And that also kind of distracted from what was occurring because he was several feet off the roadway. So I think most of the attention that people were focused on was on the roadway.
One more question. Deputy, can you describe what the scene looked like inside the car? Did he have enough space to move around, wiggle around, and how did the passenger side look and how did the back?
As indicated by the sheriff, the interior passenger compartment of the vehicle was intact. The airbags did deploy successfully. Again, he was wearing his seatbelt. I think this also kind of speaks to the marvel of modern automobiles in that they're much safer than they've ever been previously.
Deputy, any idea how many times the vehicle flipped?
We don't know that at this time. Sí.
¿Tiene preguntas en español?
Wow. How interesting to hear directly from Deputy Carlos Gonzalez, the first deputy on the scene who confirmed that Tiger was not able to stand on his own power. He was extricated, put on a backboard. Deputy Gonzalez spoke to him, felt that he was lucid, felt it would be safer to wait for the experts from LA County Fire to come and get him out, Colleen.
You know, it was very interesting, Carol, and he said he showed up. Obviously, he was sitting in the driver's seat, and he kind of smiled because when he showed up, he was trying to assess the situation. So he said to the driver, what's your name? And he said the moment he
The Kia K5 delivers style and performance at an incredible value. Drive one home with payments of just $119 per month during our President's Day event. That's just $119 per month for the stylish and fun to drive K5. Visit us, CarPro's Kia Glendale and CarPro's Kia Huntington Beach.
He didn't seem too concerned about his injuries at the time. Now, it's likely shock was setting in at that point, but he was quickly extricated by the LA County Fire Department when they arrived on scene, and he was stable enough, Colleen, that they were able to take him to the trauma center that was a little farther away than the closest hospital. That, too, is a good sign. Chief Osby told us that had, in fact, his condition not been as stable, they would have just needed to get him to the closest hospital.
Sure. Now, as we look here, it looks like they may be wrapping up this news conference as well. You know, the Deputy Gonzalez says he does a lot of traffic enforcement. The posted speed limit there is 45 miles an hour, but sometimes, you know, he'll catch people doing 80 miles an hour coming down that hill and going around that S-curve. I believe we have Eric Leonard with us right now, who's been following this investigation early on. Eric?
Yeah, it was really extraordinary to hear the Sheriff's Department provide this much detail so early on and almost buried the lead by calling up the deputy who was first on scene some minutes into this. But definitely a lot of clarity to some of the questions that we had earlier today. First and foremost, how is it that emergency people got to the scene? Now we know it was a neighbor who called 911, which also suggests that Tiger Woods may have been unable to either reach his to dig into the wreckage, and it was interesting that they made the distinction there. We sometimes see the tools firefighters use and they all kind of look the same because they're big and noisy and some of them are hydraulic, but the fire chief made a point of saying it was just mechanical tools, really prying equipment that was that enabled the firefighters to pop the windshield off and get him out. They didn't have to use some of the more powerful equipment that they have. Fire equipment travels on different units. They have to call for the specialized rescue equipment sometimes, and we heard that they didn't in fact have to use that.
Reporting live for us right now. Eric, we're going to let you go make some more phone calls, try to get some more information for us. We have with us now Mike Tirico. Obviously, you know the name, sportscaster with NBC Sports. Mike, if you could, although that is Robert Kovacic we're seeing right now. Mike, there you are right now.
Hi, Colleen.
Talk to me a little bit about what went through your mind when you heard the news today.
Well, Colleen, I'll be brutally honest with you. It was about the same place when I got a call from our NBC desk in New York on the Sunday of Kobe's accident, and I just had this terrible feeling of what we went through a year or so ago. And I think the golf world, for those who don't follow sports as closely, the golf world is pretty small because the athletes last for a long time. The people who cover golf are usually around it. So there's a small group of us, and pretty quickly you start texting and calling folks just to see what they heard. And you just realize the magnitude of it and the general relief for all of us when we heard that the injuries were non-life-threatening. I don't think any of us are thinking about Tiger and his golf future, just thinking about Tiger, who was getting to the end of his golf days and just really wants to be around to be a part of his kid's life going forward. So let's hope that that news continues to be as positive as it has been in that regard so far. I'm not going to lie to you, Mike. The first time I heard the news today, the same thing went through my mind because it was just a year ago when we were dealing with the Kobe tragedy. Speak to us a little bit about Tiger Woods and what he brings to the game that we've never seen before. No, we haven't, and it's so many things. For those of us who are old enough to remember the Mike Douglas show that used to be on TV, well, Tiger Woods at age 2 or 3 was on the Mike Douglas show with Bob Hope hitting golf balls, and he's been on the scene for most of his life. He's been on stage most of his life, and most of his life he's been the best in his age group. He did remarkable things, including winning the 1997 Masters by 12 shots, and it was the size of the victory, but also the seismic impact that it had. It changed, I think, the scope of golf to see someone of color, because of his racial background, have success at Augusta National, win the Masters. It made golf cool. It brought a lot of athletes to the game. You know, Colleen, people would always say Tiger is going to change golf because it's going to be more racially diverse. I think the real impact that Tiger had, golf became cool. And you see a lot of 6'1", 6'2", 6'3" athletes that might be playing other sports that have gone on to play golf. And I think the best way to share Tiger's impact is just to go back less than 48 hours at Riviera. Max Homa wins the golf tournament. Tiger's foundation, I'm sure, as you all have said during the day in your coverage, Mike, they're the beneficiary. I'm going to interrupt you for 2 seconds. I got to do a little housekeeping here. Just want to pause for our viewers for just a moment. Thank you for joining us. We're on early with the NBC4 News at 4 o'clock today because of this breaking news of Tiger Woods, the car crash early this morning. Once again, we're speaking with Mike Tirico from NBC Sports. Mike, if you would continue your thought there. Sure. Just quickly, I think the anecdote that sticks with me that tells you the impact of Tiger over the years, Max Homa wins this golf tournament Sunday at Riviera. And Max said that he had been trying his whole youthful life to get a high five from Tiger at that tournament. And here he is handing the tournament-winning trophy to him. And that's where he gets the chance to get that with Tiger. That tells you Tiger has inspired an entire generation of the sport. Very rare we say that about any athlete in any sport. You know, we heard from him earlier today. He was so emotional when he was talking about that. Let's talk about the comeback. I mean, the Masters, what, 7 weeks away? Tiger was sort of hinting that he was going to play in that again, or maybe sort of laying the groundwork that he hadn't fully rehabbed from his back surgery. What do you know about that? You know, just reading between the lines a little bit, listening to his comments on the broadcast on Sunday, Tiger didn't sound like he was really feeling as though he was going to make it to the Masters. He was going to wait to find out the results of an MRI to see the progress from the 5th back procedure that he had back some 5 weeks ago. You know, Tiger and the Masters, it's an inexorable link because of 1997 that we talked about. And then November of 2019, not all that long ago, about 15 months ago, that was one of the great wins in the history of the sport. Many thought Tiger wouldn't play again, wouldn't compete again. And he won the biggest of all golf tournaments. And there he was hugging his son after 22 years before that. His dad, no longer with us, Earl Woods, was waiting to hug him. So Tiger and the Masters has this captivative connection. And I didn't think we were going to see it this year. And obviously we won't now. But you're just reminded of how many great moments in this sport have been authored by Tiger Woods. And that's why an event like today has been so newsworthy, not just here locally in Los Angeles, but around the country with nonstop coverage.
You think about Tiger and how many comebacks he's had from surgery and things like that. You hear today, you know, he had surgery, we believe, on both of his legs. He has so much grit and so much determination. Hope against hope that we might see him on the course again?
Yeah, you know, we're wise enough and old enough and been around the block long enough to know that until you have any idea of the severity of injuries, you don't even speculate and say something that you regret later on. I think I could simply summarize it this way. If anyone can, he will. That is what we've seen of his ability to come back from difficult circumstances over the years. And if Tiger is presented with a challenge that is physically and humanly possible, he tries his best and more often than not has achieved some level of comeback. So who knows? I mean, it's so early. You just hope that the injuries are irreparable. He's able to walk and have a normal life and be around and see his kid's life going forward. And then we'll worry about all the sports stuff when we have the need to do such.
Okay, you mentioned his kids, and that's one of the pictures we all keep in our minds. Him playing golf recently with Charlie. Is he like a little Tiger?
You know, Tiger had been very protective of the two children, Charlie and Sam, the daughter and son, being seen in the public eye, 13 and 12 years old now. And then playing with Sam in the father-son tournament here back in December, that was surprising to some of us when we found out they were going to play. And then to watch Tiger on the golf course and have it not be about his incredible, unique focus on the moment ahead, but all of it was about his son, was really refreshing to see. It was fun. It's some of the conversations that I've had in private with Tiger, or exchanging text back and forth. He loves being a dad. And I think the opportunity to be around his kids during his rehab fueled him to win that Masters in 2019. Because as he always says, they only see me on TV or online looking at videos when I was the best golfer. They haven't been there in person, and they had the chance to do that. And I think that connection has helped spark Sam's golf. Sam has a great golf swing for 12 years old. I would never say somebody's going to be another Tiger, but he's going to be better than a bunch of us. I can be darn sure of saying that.
Well, that's for sure. All right, Mike Tirico, thank you so much for your time. We certainly appreciate it today.
My pleasure, and thanks for the great coverage today. You all provided a great resource for a lot of us who are very concerned today, so thank you.
Thank you. Carolyn.
Yeah, boy, it's just really fascinating to hear Mike's reflections on all of this. Let's bring in Robert Kovacic now. He is at the site of the news conference that just wrapped up. Robert, we heard you asking a number of the questions here.
Well, and I'm standing with the man who has a number of answers, Chief Darrell Osby, LA County Fire Department. This is the man in charge of the LA County Fire Department. First of all, it's great to see you. COVID has kept us apart, and I mean, you know, you're a lean, mean fighting machine now, Chief. So look,
Stay healthy. Try to stay healthy.
And thank you for speaking to us. Let's go back to this morning, and Spirilla's going to bring in a photo. I want to show this to you, Colleen and Carolyn, as we talk, because now we have clarified that it wasn't exactly the jaws of life that were used to extract Mr. Woods from that car. Explain to me again what this is. Let's show them this piece here.
Well, this is actually a Halligan tool. So a Halligan tool and an axe was used to pry Tiger Woods out of the vehicle. It was reported earlier that we used the jaws of life. The jaws of life was part of our cache, but it was not necessary to extricate him from the vehicle.
Chief, we asked you before. You had roughly, we said about 9 or 10 LA County paramedics showing up to respond. In that first moment, you realize it's Tiger Woods. Does it change the MO at all?
The firefighters were apprised by the sheriff on scene that it was Tiger Woods, but it doesn't change their behaviors. They're highly trained individuals, so the first thing they do is they'll assess his level of consciousness, make sure there's breathing, because you want to control the airway, stop breathing, make sure that he's breathing, control bleeding, and then check for major injuries. So that's standard protocol for us.
Tell me about the injuries and what you witnessed. I know that, we're going into some personal details here, but what can you describe for us?
What I can describe is that it was a single vehicle rollover incident with a person trapped, which is Tiger Woods. Our firefighters had to utilize the Halligan tool and the axe to pry him free. Because of the nature of the injuries, they had to use a a collar to secure his neck, a backboard for his potential spinal injuries, splint his legs, oxygen, and probably an IV. He was transported to Harbor UCLA Hospital because that's a trauma center. The nature of the incident, because it was a rollover incident, was a serious injury. They had to extricate him, required him to be transported to a trauma center for the appropriate level of care.
So I understand the car's on its side. To extricate him, you go in through the driver's side door, and then you have to very delicately pull this man out, worried about a spinal injury, correct?
Absolutely. In this particular incident, we responded a paramedic squad, an engine company, a truck company with specialized equipment, and a battalion chief for a total of 10 personnel. So for any type of incident like that, we're really concerned about a potential spinal injury. So during the entire time